Good evening, guys. How's it going? Let's get started. And Richard's first off the rack. Evening, good people. Morning to some of you in Europe. Ah, yes. Our morning dwellers in the old country, as they call it, isn't it? G'day, Kate. Yes, very much. Trouble. Zakia, good to see you. And Blinky, he's always here in the evenings. He's not shopping then, so he makes an early appearance. Anticipation, Blinky. Flowing through. Yes, the insults are not too far away as usual. Yes, definitely. Dave, how are you? Morning, Bert. Yes, Zakia. I think he was in actually. Dave, are you still in Bulgaria? Oh, you were in the mountains. He's been enjoying some very good treats up there. Hey, Robert. And there's Alex as well. Good to see you, Alex. You're listening in remotely. Fair enough. God, I'm at the bottom. It's a few years here. I'm on my water and on my regular cola kombucha. It's actually quite nice. It's like the old colas, because it doesn't have any sugar or anything like that. So you can actually taste the actual cola itself, which is nice. Yes, still in the mountains of Bulgaria, enjoying the good life there with some pastoral treats. I'm jealous. Oops, missed that one. Yes, my tardiness. Yes. Oh, well. You're lucky I turned up. I could go into Greek time and turn up 30 minutes late. As my friends say, Harry's on Greek time. Got to enjoy life. You can't rush everything. Isn't that right, Fluffy Rainbow? You have to enjoy, notice the little plants growing and stuff like that. Yes. And sometimes having those awful thoughts. Yes. Yeah, that's true, Richard. I may have just not turned up. Your tubier at the main gig. My day job is. That is very much true. That is very much true. Even though I try to get a few things out there and all that. So, yes, I've got a new. If I get a chance, I've got everything ready to go. It's a new one on methylation. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Yes, it'll be some really good ammo for the carnivore community. Yes, perfect clock for me. I can relate to that, Blinky. That is a perfect clock. Ah, yes. The Serpanos clock. Yes, very much along those lines. It's irregular. It's, it's interesting. It's not boring like every other clock. It's variable. Yes. About right, Blinky. I don't agree with him, Richard. God. Anyway, a bit of more fun at my expense. That's okay. At least I get a few laughs out of it as well. Nice one, Blinky. I'll actually save that in the vault of images. We're going to keep these ones. Yes. I actually go through some of these and actually just laugh at them. I'll go through them if I need to laugh, and I just am in hysteria of laughter. So you got to laugh. If you can't laugh at yourself, who can you laugh at? Exactly. So as I was saying, I'll have a beautiful video on methylation shortly. It should be out early next week, and that will basically have a lot of spin on it. I'm actually trying to go through bloody one of Gregor's videos at the moment because I'm relating it back to that video as well. So it's going to be a bit of ammo against the actual vegetarded of this world. So still working on that front. So I'm not neglecting that side of things. Blinky. Yes, yes. One must enjoy and move at a smooth and comfortable pace through the comments. Yes. See, we could do something to improve efficiency. I could ignore your comments and then I'd become more efficient. Last night I had some beautiful fish with a bit of butter on them. Today I had pork, some pork chops. Very nice. And tomorrow I did actually go with my neighbour Ling. We went up to the butchers. This is the West Hobart Butchers. They have really nice varieties of sausages, and it's all they're award winning. They're really good quality stuff. And we didn't find the Italian ones. Unfortunately, they sold out, which was really annoying. And so we'll probably pop up next week and try and get some. Then they should have more because they were running sort of low, they told us. And so, yeah, looking forward to that. Yes, very nice. G'day, zombie. Oops. Oh, I just jumped quite a bit. That was StreamYard, not me. Doom, doom. Methylation visual would be great. My doc put me on B vitamins, but as far as I remember, Paul Mason says choline is much more important. Choline's important, but at the same time, you can go from, most people with their genetics can do the conversion of methionine to choline to betaine or to folate. So there's a small percentage of people that can't do that, like myself. So we have to get directly. We can't do the conversion on the choline. So you have to get directly the choline, and we can only do the straight conversion to betaine, and that's it, as a methyl donor. So it's slightly different, but that's a small percentage of the population. Most people are quite flexible. Choline's very important. It also exports fat out of the liver. People haven't seen the video that I did about choline and fatty liver. It's on my channel. It's quite an old one, but it is very informative in that regard. So it goes way back, early last year, I believe. So that's a very informative one on that side on fatty liver. I haven't done the methylation one yet on choline because there's the genetic aspects and all that sort of stuff. But the tomorrow's methylation will have quite a few twists and won't be what you expect. So, you'll understand why the carnivore diet is superior when it comes to methylation. And then that will basically create the foundation information for when I do my my later one on the thyroid and other things like that. So I'm going to try and tie it all together with the anti-repeat stuff that I did earlier, the earlier stuff in regards to thyroid function and stuff like that. But it's basically, I'm trying to tie everything together by providing, because there is a methylation component to the thyroid. And so I wanted to first cover that part and nail that down on the superiority of the carnivore diet and why it is in comparison to others in terms of methylation, and then go to the next stage. So it's sort of a continuation. So you can follow the sort of, basically connect the dots. That's what I'm trying to do, those sort of videos. That's why I was going to do the one on the thyroid, the second one, but I didn't do it. I changed my mind. I said, no, I have to do this because then it makes more sense. People will understand why and get it much better. So that will be the approach to it. B vitamins play an important role. They play an important role with the gut bacteria. They play an important role with a number of biological functions. Basically, all fat-soluble vitamins, B vitamins, and a lot of the different minerals are cofactors to enzymatic catalytic processes in the body. So obviously you need those sort of things, but there are key elements that play important roles. Choline is one of them. Riboflavin is another. Riboflavin has an effect on the MTHFR gene directly, the other pathway, which is another very important pathway, the folate, B12, and to a lesser extent, B6 as a component of that. But in order to basically modulate and improve the functioning of that pathway, riboflavin plays a very big role. And it's very important for for fat and protein sort of when you're on a more keto, low carb type diet, the requirements go slightly higher, where with a lot of the other micronutrients they sort of come down a bit, where carbohydrates require more of the other stuff. So that's an important thing. And I've talked about choline for some time. I do supplement with choline now and then, and I do recommend people consume a bit of liver, not massive, but a bit of liver now and then, and a number of eggs to get sufficient choline in their diet, because it is a very important part of that methylation system. But it's not the only thing, and it'll become more apparent when that next video that I do on methylation, which will basically turn a lot of things on their head, and you'll understand the superiority of the carnivore diet compared to other diets and why it is. So I will leave it at that without giving too much away. So I think you'll be shocked, and you'll have very good ammo in support of the carnivore diet against the vegetarian and many other groups out there that bag the carnivore diet. So stay tuned. God, worked on, hate that as well. If you have to work on the weekends. I'm here entertaining you guys. Even better. Harry, could you run through why vitamin D seems to be important for neurological conditions and neurological functions in general? What are the mechanisms? That would take a lot, and showing a lot of diagrams and all that. But fundamentally, it does play, it's important for about over 1,000 processes, and it's very important as like a pro-hormone. So it has basically has both endocrine effects. That means it regulates part of the immune system and then regulates a number of important functions in brain function. Plus, it does also support the beneficial bacteria, which also through the vagus nerve interact with the brain. 90% is direction from the gut to the brain. There is signaling that happens there. So there is that the sort of precrine type of signaling involved. And then you've basically got, this is sort of in general, and then you've basically got the autocrine side of things, where you're actually affecting hormones and chemistry in the body to affect some of these neurological pathways. So it's a very complex. If you actually put vitamin D in the middle and then connect all these lines, it'll look like an absolute mess. That is how complicated the interactions go. So, I mean, that's why we use reductionism, just to basically understand the different pathways. But that doesn't tell you a lot, because from that you can't make assumptions, because there's complex interactions with all these different things, which is very important. But it is a video that I want to make. It'd probably be an hour-long video, which will cover a lot of this sort of neurological side, which will cover the B vitamins, will cover the fat-soluble vitamins, and, provide a more total picture of how all this sort of works together with the gut microbiome, the signaling and stuff like that, the effects on the sort of reptilian brain and that area of the brain, that back part here, with some of the B vitamins. So it's a complex picture. And let's not forget the importance of vitamin D, not only for us, for our own functioning, but also for the bacteria. They as well require the beneficial air to basically do a lot of their things that they do. So it's quite a complicated thing. It take too long to go through everything, but it is very critically important. When you actually do, if you do something like a PubMed search, and I'll just bring it quickly up. There, as you can see, there's about 400 studies which cover the neuroprotective effects of vitamin D. And even when we look at, this is in PubMed, so when we look at neurodegeneration, quite a few studies there as well. And when we look at autoimmune, and obviously, there's quite a few in this, as you can see, shitloads. And that's what, remember, a lot of autoimmune things have to do with hormones, signaling, all sorts of things, the thyroid, you name it. Vitamin D is involved in a lot of different areas. It's basically, let's put it this way, Dave, it's a massive rabbit hole in that regard. Vitamin D is basically at the heart of the immune system, and the immune system plays a very important role in neuroprotection and also dealing with pathogens and all sorts of things. So it links in so many different ways. I could go on for hours just talking about that. In future, I'll do something that will go into a number of these areas, but I don't like seeing things in isolation. When I talk about neuro conditions, neurological functions in general and stuff like that, I like to basically look at, what this, because it's sort of more of an enabler. It basically, through an autocrine type approach, it actually interacts with other hormones that have brain effects in the brain, and it also interacts also at a chemical level, so it can actually affect some chemical processes in the brain and other parts of the body as well. So it's a very complicated interaction. In some cases it's a soft interaction, some cases it's a more pronounced interaction. So it's very important for proper functioning of the brain and many other organs in the body. The brain has got shitloads of vitamin D receptors, like the immune system, the brain as well. And most of the organs in the body have shitloads. I mean, I've talked about the prostate and some of the importance in cell differentiation, cell proliferation. In every single tissue in the body, vitamin D and vitamin A are there playing a role, a synergistic role. Without one or the other, you're going to get into trouble. That recently I sort of covered that in a recent video on the so-called bullshit toxicity. But it's very important to understand there are synergistic relationships. It's not just vitamin D on its own. Let's not be reductionist. We need to understand these synergistic relationships and look at those specific areas and then cover all the synergies and how they work together. So stay tuned, and there will be interesting videos in the future on a lot of these subjects matters. I'm just going through them at the moment. I'm going through the methylation, then going through the, the covering a bit more extensively and in more detail the thyroid issue, and then moving from there on some other biological functions, and sort of trying to tie things together in a logical way, which you guys will actually get a deeper understanding how the body works. That's my aim. My aim is to basically get you guys to a certain level, then we can actually talk much higher level stuff. So I'm trying to get you there, but in a very basic and easy to understand way. I'm not basically using scientific terminology, as you know. I use plain English. I keep it to a way you guys can understand and get some benefit from it. And then you'll be able to see from your own self how to biohack and how to influence these different pathways in that regard. As I always say, steak, salt, and sun, and there's a lot of truth in that three combination. Anyway, let's move on. Good, you survived zombie, but put your feet up and relax with the Harry. Thanks, Richard. Harry, do you drink companies put taurine in energy drinks? Oh, some of them do, but it's not the actual taurine that's actually the issue. It's the actual. I mean, I take 3 grams or more. Taurine is actually biosynthesized by the body. Taurine isn't the issue. Actually, the issue is the caffeine in the drinks. Most of the issues, the early garbage science out there that was criticizing taurine as being a problem, basically was to cover for the food industry that wanted to protect its caffeine. The reality is it's caffeine, and they knew it. And then that all got exposed, that it was all caffeine all the time, because there was a couple of people that did studies on taurine only, very mega dosing up to 10 grams of taurine, as I've talked before. No effect. The only thing was positive effects, including reduction in blood pressure. So they found no ill effects with taurine. Why would there be? It comes from animal-based foods, and it's also synthesized by the body. So there is no issue. Oh, shit, it's raining outside. So, yeah, but it's the caffeine, and it's too much and too quick. And a lot of young kids consume too much of it and too quick, and sometimes they can get, because of too much caffeine in particular, some sort of irregular heartbeats or stuff like that. And there have been some incidents where kids have consumed far too much and have had some sort of heart incident. So yes. And it was basically, they had to, typical of the food industry to always point the finger at the non-culprit to cover their asses. So what should one expect then? That sort of behavior from that, group of food mafia. Cheers, fellow seekers of the paths. G'day, Sam. Supposed to improve energy. Cheap and good marketing addition, I suspect. Yeah, it's there. It doesn't improve energy. It keeps you. The caffeine basically keeps you very wired, and very high amounts of it. We know in some people, not in everybody. Half the population are good metabolizers of caffeine. The other half are sort of vary. Some are very poor, and those who are very poor can really get really severe heart palpitations and all sorts of other irregular heartbeats and other issues, and potentially risk of death. So if things go too far, if they overdo it, because they're not a good caffeine metabolizer. They're just a slow metabolizer, so that they get into problems. Anyway, let's move on. How is Sam? Hey, Sam. Okay. I think it's cool they added to the trend. But my vegan friends have... Oh, okay. Over it. Okay, fair enough. Probably the only good thing there is not the caffeine, is the taurine, which they probably need. I'll drink one raw egg every time Harry says vegetarian or crackpot on the show. Let's see what happens. Oh, God. I just said vegetarian and crackpot. I didn't read your comment. That's 2 eggs. You're fucked. You're going to run out of eggs by the end of this, Sam. Amazing. I can get my energy drink with no sugar and 4 grams of taurine. And almost makes them sound good, and shitloads of caffeine, which is the problem for some people. Don't do it at night. You won't get to sleep. I've got dinner for the kids in the oven, and my steak is almost cooked. Great. Sounds good. Harry, is PSMP a good way to get ripped? Any concerns regarding rabbit starvation? Look, it depends on what your fat stores are. At the end of the day, you will not induce rabbit starvation until you basically, it's usually about, I think it kicks in at, I can't remember, I think it's just slightly below, depending on what your activities levels and stuff like that. It's sort of 6, depends on people, 8% body fat. You will get mild effects, and then that will increase, and you see it basically with, we've seen it in the past in studies and research, and people starving for long periods of time, they waste away their muscles. And once you've basically waste away your fats and you start getting into muscle catabolism, then, yeah, you're in that rabbit starvation mode. So remember, people in the past used to be quite lean compared to today. So to get into rabbit starvation with the majority of the population today takes a long bloody time, I can tell you. That's why you can fast for, if you're a big, very overweight person, up to 385 days as the world record stands, as long as you're getting the micronutrients in there and you're being monitored. So this is not to be done, recommended to be done on your own at home without any medical supervision. This should be done with medical supervision and monitoring, and people need to get the appropriate micronutrients, because you still have enzymatic processes that are taking place. You're just not taking macros in, but you still need micros. Otherwise, you'll get into trouble if you do that. But yeah, rapid starvation only really kicks in once your fat stores are very low, and then your body starts catabolizing your own muscle, and yeah, that's when you're in trouble. But most of us in our societies are never going to get to that level, because a supermarket is right next door, and if we get to that level, we can just go and binge in the supermarket, so we can prevent it. We're not in that same sort of environment anymore to easily induce that. But in terms of, protein, you can actually increase quite a bit. Remember the study that with a rat that never suffered rapid starvation, but it was on 70% protein, and it just basically shrunk. It had enough protein to maintain its muscle mass and to build more tissue, but it just basically literally wiped out practically to zero. Well, not zero, but very low levels. Its fat stores. When they ripped it open, it was just basically lean as you couldn't even find the fat around the subcutaneous or the viscera was just nearly to nothing practically. So basically, high protein type approach, if you've got fat stores, can get you ripped pretty fast. It's a way of cutting, in a sense. You put yourself initially, you do a bit of a fast to put yourself in a ketotic state. You add a bit of fat in there initially, and then you cut back on the actual energy. So you're forcing the body to basically release free fatty acids and provide the energy for you while you support the glucagon side of things and support sufficient other biological processes that require plenty of protein. So yeah, you really have to get very low in the fat stuff. Hephaestus, dizzy. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. But are you doing this for some sort of sport thing, or what's the story? Anyway, I get this sugar-free energy drink from Aldi. It's 100 milligrams of taurine. Is it free of caffeine? Sort of that bit of rabbit hole question. No, it's nothing to, I mean, it just reminds me, Dave, that of another video that I need to do. I just gave a general outline there for people just to have a general idea. But vitamin D's, we're talking about around about 1,000. And then when you're looking at, vitamin A, there's another 500 plus biological, effects that it has in the body, so it's quite complicated. And then there is complex interactions. These things work synergistically. They don't work on their own. So I try to avoid reduction. That's why I talk about the thing and then talk about the micronutrients. And when you actually look at all these diseases, all these biological processes happen inside us, and you look at all the micronutrients and the macros that are required, and the amino acids and fatty acids that are required for all of these biological functions, the only diet which actually furnishes sufficient quantities of these things, when you actually look, like put them side to side, is the carnivore diet. And it doesn't surprise me, based on the N15, N14 data, we know that humans were hyper carnivores and super carnivores. So it doesn't surprise me, And when we have less of these things, we become deficient, and it's deleterious to some extent. It lessens our life. It causes other health issues and all that. And nowadays, with the amount of kibble, refined kibble that's out there, people are really getting sick. But that's another story. Yeah, look, no question's a bad question or anything like that. Bring them on. It sometimes reminds me and motivates me to go away and do some of this sort of stuff, or try and find the time. So no, I think no issue. Don't worry about it. Thanks for asking. But I also saw, yes, nothing like a bit of. Yes, Utopia. Great thing. Yes, I have to say I like espresso coffee as well. It's coming from Australia. You mean it's across the entire Tasman and hitting New Zealand as well now? Yeah, there is a bit of a low front, so you can hear it outside. It's quite heavy. So hope it's not creating too much disturbance. I'm hoping. I haven't really looked heavily into that sort of stuff. So I sort of keep on the main sort of thrust of things. But is there any specific sort of thing? What have you learned? What have you heard? You know, so what's the thing that you've basically, I mean, I've suffered from this sort of stuff with oxalates, but is there any specific stuff that you're interested in asking about, these little needle-like things, or not? I mean, I've talked about oxalates. I've been meaning to do one on oxalates. I mean, some of the worst. I'll tell you some of the worst rafids that you will find out there are in kiwi fruit. They are really thin and long. They are some of the most deadly type. Trying to remember somebody actually did something with a kiwi, and they really got. I don't know whether anybody remembers. There's somebody that did something with a kiwi. I think they. What did they? I think they actually did a juice thing with kiwi. And they so much kiwis, they end up getting so many of these really thin needles, and they literally their whole digestive system had been sort of poked with shitloads of these needle-like structures. They were in hospital basically. They had to basically undergo some treatment, but you did another anti-nutrient. Just thought you might have. No, it's just it's just what they look. I mean, hold on, this. Let's. Okay, and there they are. Let me just put that up. And that's what these are like the ones you'll find. This is like the ones you'll find in kiwi fruit. So, actually, they look like the ones in kiwi fruit a bit. Hold on. Anyway, I can't find exactly the ones, but they are very much the Kiwi ones, very much like these sort of needle type, really thin needle type stuff. They are really, really nasty, and that's one thing. If you're plant based and you're on here, you've just heard this. Do not touch kiwi. Do not juice most of these plants, especially kiwi. It is really, really dangerous. I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's really, really dangerous. Richard's got this one here. There they are. Yeah, very needle-like. Yeah. Yeah, they're absolutely nasty as. Kiwi fruit. There you go. These neat, and they're all intertwined in this funny combination. So they really just stick all over the place. They, absolutely, yes. If you could call this a hell on earth smoothie, it would be a kiwi smoothie. We're talking about, yes, it's like ingesting a whole lot of needles, really microscopic needles, extremely nasty, guys, extremely nasty. Where am I? I've lost my spot. Yep. Anyway. Yeah, that's, all they are. But I don't know what you were sort of asking about. It's just basically a crystalline structure. That's what these nasty needle-like shapes are. Yeah, raphids. Pretty nasty little pieces. But that's what we call oxalates. Oxalates is sort of the family of them, of these things. I still will use the term oxalate because it's better known by people out there. But yes. But it's nasty stuff, Let's say I've suffered a lot of oxalate poisoning and pain and multiple kidney stones. 3 that I had to be surgically involved. The 4th one, I sort of took a lot of citric acid and stuff like that and sort of was able to, urinate it out. Luckily, I didn't end up in hospital for a 4th time. The 3 times I got operated twice, and once they were able to get it through. So, yes, an awful experience. Let me just say, an awful experience. That was in my keto days, yes, and that's about going back now, 7.5 odd years ago. So yes, Yes, too many plants on a kiwi on the typical keto diet of the low carb diets of the time. There was just not enough protein from animal foods and too many plants, and a lot of them were high oxalate plants with a lot of these nasty crystalline needle bits of hell. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, pineapples, I'm not sure. I don't know how much they have. I don't think the pineapples really have a lot of oxalate, but I could be wrong. There are some fruit that are low in oxalates. There's actually, let me just see if I can find, because off the top of my head, is this doing? Hold on. Go back here. I've got it somewhere. What's that one? No, that's not it. Somewhere here. I've got a PDF somewhere that basically shows their different quantity. Okay, that's oxalate content of food. And the other one's the food chart thing. Okay, so let me just put that on there. Oops. So pineapple, low. So pineapple has, for a serving, which is 1 cup, it's low, 4 milligrams. Remember, you can do up to about, you have to be below 50. So that's the key thing. That was another one from Richard. Okay. So he's got a list as well of here. Good on you. So basically this list goes through the different types of things, low, and it gives you a quantity so you can measure, and the amount in there, where that other one probably doesn't. Did I kill that off? That has quantities as well. Oh, that's good. Yes. So it goes through all the different foods and provides different amounts that are there. Obviously eggs have none, bacon has none. Why does it not surprise me that animal foods do not have anything? A tuna salad, yes, but a tuna on its own doesn't, has 0. What? Throw out the salad and eat the tuna. So, yeah, I mean, the avocados have got a very high. One fruit has got about 19. So if you have 2 avocados, you're nearly close to your max. So avocados have quite a bit of oxalate. Oranges do as well. One fruit. I see 1 fruit of orange has actually more than 1 fruit of kiwi. 29 against, dates as well. Figs are moderate. Tangerine is on the high side as well. We look at apples, bananas, berries, and stuff like that. They tend to be much lower. Apricots, pretty much little or none. Mangoes, lemons are pretty much none. And lemons, that 1 milligram, it's more the skin has most of the stuff, not the juice. So pretty much none in that regard. So yeah, it's the sort of stuff. And I mean, that one of Richard's list looks pretty good as well. So do check that out. Oops. Thank you, StreamYard, for moving my thing. Yes, it definitely does, Ness. It definitely does. It doesn't look very healthy at all. I just started reading about SHBG. Got any videos where talking about it? I talk about it in my videos here and there. I am going to do a video on, covering, the different areas, growth hormones and testosterone and, all these sort of aspects and their interactions and stuff like that. I'm doing the series now. I'm sort of methylation, then the thyroid, and I'm moving through doing these sort of things and looking at the different areas of the body and all that, and then going to be tying it to the gut microbiome, the sort of stuff that I've been talking about that I haven't done yet. So yes, it will happen. It will happen. So Yes, it's in the pipeline. Let me just shut all that down. Yeah, it would be good if it was. Yeah, I'll try and actually find. Let me just look at that one of Richard's. So that was a St. John's. So does it? Okay, vegetables, apricots, cereals, soy, snacking. So it just generally covers. It's not comprehensive about all foods. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I may see if I can locate that other list that that I on oxalates and stuff like that, and try and get it up there. But I mean, I'm not basically. Uh, I'm not going to basically get into it at this stage, but I'll try and find it so I can sort of get the information out, because I've suffered from from damn toxicity, and I don't want other people to suffer the same. So yeah, but anyway, that's a long conversation, because it affects. I mean, even vitamin D has an interaction. There's a lot of the hormonal system. It's a much more complex picture. So, and I want to do a video on it, so I don't want to give too much away. There are other people that do view my live streams, so you know what I mean, Ness. Anyway, let's move on. Teenagers will stop smoking weed and risk certain harms with kiwi juice smoothies. Yeah, don't tell the kids. Whatever you do, don't tell the kids. Definitely don't tell the kids. G'day, Bjorn. You know. And that was that list. Okay, bit of a conversation. They do. They do say that. I can tell you one thing: vitamin D basically has a very important modulating effect, so you don't get the spikes. You don't need honey. Maybe they're vitamin D deficient, so that's a bit of a giveaway. So anyway, like everything, it needs to be in its physiological range, not above, too far up or too far low. That's when you get things out of whack, as I said. And reductionist people then make up a whole lot of shit, like I suspect Ness has heard. So that's why I'm trying to do these series, to sort of demystify a lot of things and sort of clear up a lot. But there's so much garbage and nonsense out there. It takes time, guys. And I can't let too many things out of the bag, because I'm trying to also basically make a reputation on YouTube as well. So I can't give too much away. So in many cases, when I say, I don't want to give too much away, because then other people may be listening and then go away and do a video. Why should they, when they're using my information? So that's pretty much it. So why I'm a bit protective, and unless it's a question which is going to help somebody's health, then I'll give them direct information, but I won't provide a lot of mechanistic information, stuff like that, to potentially some of my competition in the YouTubia world. So as you can understand, yes. Yeah, under-eating can play a role as well in disrupting some of these hormonal things. So I always ask people, what sort of ketosis are you doing? So yes, low-grade levels do not create these sort of dysregulated states. Ah, yes, it seems like some crackpots, egg, Sam, that goes against the body's interaction with different states. Precisely. Egg, Sam, crackpot theory, egg, Sam, that's 2 extras. That boy's going to be basically throwing up by the end of this live stream. Did you see the recent paper where archaeologists have starch-loving bacteria on the teeth, and the author tried to argue against them eating meat? Yeah, it's garbage. It's basically oh, yes. What did you go to the site for the N15? What is your go-to site? The Institute of it's the Institute of Anthropology and Primatology Center or Studies. I can't remember. It's the Leipzig, Germany one. I'll put a link for it after. I have to search where I've bloody got the link. It's the one. It's the information that I got off, Michael Eads years ago. This is years ago. We're talking about nearly a decade ago. So that's where I downloaded the information, looked at it, and since then, I've been from academia because I'm subscribed. I get all my N15 research from them. So all the current one stuff that comes out. So that's how I did the thing on the ancient Greeks, and I've sort of talked about some of the other stuff. But yeah, so that's where that. Getting back to this one, absolutely cockwomble nonsense. Now, they actually this study is actually looking at the last of the Neanderthals, who were basically marooned off the coast on the Iberian Peninsula, which means Spain, Portugal today, off the coast of the Atlantic coast. That was the sort of last refuge of the Neanderthals. And they sometimes forget that these people did eat acorns and stuff like that in these last final days. And it was basically, as with the collapse of the mega beast, that period, and the competition with other Homo sapiens and other hominins that were basically, displacing them. They were some of the last Neanderthals before they died out. And they basically had really severe teeth decay and all sorts of health issues. And that was because they couldn't access enough meat, and they were eating more and more carbohydrates, like from acorns and stuff like that. That was starvation diet that these people were going through. That's what they found, But they ignore the earlier stuff. This is all, vegetated crap. They'll find something. They'll say, "Oh, look at this," and ignore all the other massive past literature. They'll just focus on the one area in order to make it's like like a whole argument out of nothing. People at the end of their tether, at the end of their survival, basically eating kibble, trying to survive at the edge of Europe, off the Atlantic coast. And that is really dirty, disgusting, and vile, these veg-tarded type academics. And that's what they do. They play these stupid little games. The other thing that's very important that we need to say is that, as the mega beast declined, all hominins started switching to other plants, tubers and things like that, started being introduced in their diet. That happened about 125 to about 75,000 years, where we had this sort of climate disruptive effect in that period, where we also see the emergence of the ApoE22 allele, which is the ability to basically, those people to be able to manage more carbohydrates, and also the predominance of the allele of the ApoE33 by that stage was becoming more dominant. And these were adaptations. Eventually, as our food supply started dwindling with the mega beast collapses at about 12,700 years ago, we basically then saw the shift. About 15,000 years ago, we actually first domesticated the dog. Not that we needed dogs to hunt, but we basically were running out of food and we needed to be more competitive. So the people that developed the dog, domesticated the dog, was to enhance their basically hunting. That's why they domesticated the dog. It wasn't basically because they had nothing else to do. It was out of necessity, and that happened about 15,000 years ago. And then by 12,700, we see a mega beast collapse throughout the whole Eurasian area. That is not surprising because, megafauna really were overexploited by humans by that stage. And, they were getting more sophisticated with domestication of dogs. And eventually they moved into the domestication of plants and animals. And by 5,500 years ago, tillage, which then, that took off in a big way, and our health went to shit as well. And through this period, that sort of period, we went from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens. And, basically we lost that bigger brain size that Cro-Magnon man had, for instance, shrunk by 200 cc, about, 10 odd percent. And pretty much the rest is history in regards to that. And then we've basically since then adapted to more plants because we didn't have, domesticated animals and stuff like that, have added things like that. But up until then, the N15 data was quite clear. Towards the end, as we moved into the mega beast collapse, things changed. Because at the end of the day, you still need an energy source. You need some sort of energy. If the climate is starting to warm up, you're a successful hunter and wiping out, because humans are not planning. They just out of necessity, they'll hunt. In Africa, for instance, you've got big cats and stuff like that, which contain human populations and also contain humans' adventurism. They've got far more, dangerous combinations of predators. So it sort of contains, and then also you can't move between climatic zones because it's a north-south situation where in the Eurasian, most things grow along latitudinal lines and you can actually move across vast areas and hunt through vast areas. Plus, they are more temperate climates that tend to have less predators that can contain humans. And as a consequence, human population exploded in these areas and hunting went to its zenith. But that was also our downfall because, like rabbits or rats over, too many, then eventually you've got a population collapse or you shift to another energy source. And that's what we happened. Unfortunately, we shifted to the wrong one, but out of necessity, we had no other option at the time. So, and the rest is history, as they say. But these people, they look at this sort of stuff, ignore all the past stuff because it doesn't suit them, and ignore some of the archaeological, the climate change, all these things that were happening at this way that sort of shifted humans to certain other sort of starvation type foods, which are plants, So, but they won't argue from that point of view. They'll try to argue and say, look here. There's something different from all the other stuff that the other people are saying. Again, because they can't defeat the N15 data. So if you can't argue it, you need to find examples where, you've got the opposite. So they find these little, needle in the haystack type things to basically make a big, something out of a molehill, as they say, out of nothing. And that's what they do. It's just basically misdirected everything else. So, yeah, what can one say? Anyway, not a problem. Good, good. Organic cola kombucha. That's what I'm drinking. Yep. No. It's just when we're talking about them, we're actually talking about the actual oxalate is like a you could say like that the general name covering, but raphids is basically the sort of the what they look like, or the crystalline structures that are part of oxalates. So that's one way of actually viewing them. So yeah, I know people sometimes use both names or slightly differently. I don't know whether it's to confuse people or why they do it, but basically, when you look under an electron microscope, an oxalate will look like a raphid. It will look like some sort of spiky thing, some sort of crystalline structure that can, stick in there and really, do some damage, So anecdotally, my testosterone has been very high on keto and carnivore. Have not measured free or SHB6 hormone binding globulin through. Neither have I. Really, if you feel good, you feel good in that regard. How exactly does nitrogen isotope analysis confirm how much carb early humans ate? Lots of vegetards trying to attack that point. It's the N15 or N14. So the nitrogen, that proteins have, are basically have fixed nitrogen. Okay. So what they're looking at is basically what type it is. If it's a 15, it comes from an animal. If it's a 14, it comes from a plant. Simple as that. And so that's how you know which protein it's actually come from. And then they do an analysis of the collagen of humans, and then they work out what is the source of the protein. And different people in different parts of the world at different times have slightly variations of N15 or N14. And there are good reasons for that. Especially in more recent times, the N14 amounts are much higher. Why? Because people are eating less animal foods compared to the past. So if you were to do an isotope analysis on a modern human, you would find much higher levels of N14 than N15 because the protein is coming from a plant more than an animal. So, especially vegetarians and vegans and people like that, or people that are eating too much processed kibble and stuff like that and very little animal protein. So they don't necessarily have to be vegans or vegetarians, but may consume very little in terms of animal nutrition. So, that's how you would. But it's an expensive isotope analysis, and you don't need to do it. We don't need to do it. We just have to look at the archaeological evidence and use that to basically argue our point that for 3.5 million years, humans and all hominins before them, so from way before Homo erectus, right through from modern, what we call the Homo species or speciation, so the family of Homo, they basically, from Homo erectus right through to Homo sapiens sapiens, which are the modern human sapiens, pretty much the N15 data confirms that for most of the history of all hominin, so was basically very high in the super or hypercarnivore levels, the N15 levels. So the N15 isotopes in the collagen of bones of our past ancestors is higher than Arctic foxes, than wolves, and lions and tigers and stuff like that, well-known predators. So humans in the past not only ate other animals like ruminants and stuff like that, but also ate predators as well. So they were just eating anything and everything that walked the earth. And as things declined and the access, because all animals, you know what all animals do? They do one thing in nature. They pursue calories, because in nature, calories are rare. There's not, today we have an economic system that we've developed through civilization where we can extract a lot of cheap calories. But in nature, there's not many cheap calories. Plants not provide any calories. Fruit, very little in calories. So the only thing you've really got is tubers and animals. And animals are far more higher. They used to be when the climate was much colder, had more subcutaneous fat. So, gram for gram, they were a better bet to bring down an animal, go out and hunt and bring down an animal. You'd get far more calories from it. And that's why it was just, sheer, focus on calories. And we adapted to that food. And our brains got bigger because we ate more fat. And our bodies got bigger because we ate more protein. It's simple as that. And that data confirms all that. It's quite clear. It's, it's not complicated. It's not rocket science. If you ask an archaeologist, we're talking about real archaeologists, not these sort of modern day, in more recent times that have, academia has been infiltrated by a lot of vegetarian and all that. But, you go back 70s, 60s, 50s and 40s and earlier and look at the archaeologists of that time and ask them, those older archaeologists, the grey-haired ones, middle-aged and older, they will basically tell you when we look at a site, we can tell whether it's a hunter-gatherer or whether it's basically an early Neolithic, agriculturalist. And we know that because we see basically malformations, skeletal malformations of different types because of deficiencies. And also we see little white spots on the cranium. And that's iron deficiencies. So they know that these people, and then when they do the isotope analysis, they know that most of the proteins are coming from plants, not from animals. And that's why they have these high deficiencies. They've got a few domesticated animals and, but primarily most of the food's coming, then they've got these and that's the key thing. And that's what that data shows. So, if you want to really, if you check the Ancestral Health Symposium, if you Google basically, basically Michael Eads, you will basically get the information. He actually shows quite clear the information. He actually even shows the device that they use to basically do the isotope analysis and all that. So he goes into it quite, in detail. And he was the person that put me onto this. And then I went away and checked the Leipzig, Germany, the Institute of Leipzig, Germany, that does this research. And that's where he got the research. So I went to the source and downloaded the studies. And that's how I started then, subscribing through academia to basically get all the N15 type studies and all that. So I could actually look at all this. And I've confirmed it to myself because for me, it was more, I did it for myself. I needed to know, is a carnivore diet, because obviously I interacted with a lot of people back then, and I started moving closer and closer to a carnivore diet, sort of shifted slowly in it because I started eating more animal foods, because basically of that research. I actually came across the carnivore community later. It was the actual research of Michael Eads. It's probably why I didn't have any transition issues getting into a carnivore, a 90-odd% carnivore diet nowadays, because I was already about 70 plus. I'd already shifted quite a bit and taken out a lot of plants and stuff like that out of my diet because I didn't see the necessity, and it was a waste of money and a waste of time cooking the shit, So, but it was the actual data. If the data wasn't there, I probably would still be doing keto or some other low carb thing. It was basically the data that basically convinced me that humans, for the majority of their existence, did it this way. I couldn't ignore the facts. They were quite clear. They were stark, over millions of years of collagen-related information that basically made it quite clear what humans of the past did. Just because the megabeast collapse forced us 12.7 thousand years ago to make shifts and include more plants and stuff like that, and domesticate the dog and start domesticating from the dog other animals. That was out of necessity, all this. The last hurrah of the hunter-gatherer was the domestication of the dog to enhance their hunting. That just quickened, basically, the megabeast collapse. That's all it did. And then they were forced into, accessing more kibble out of necessity. So that's the real story. Hasn't been told properly. Even I, probably guilty. I was going to make a series with Bart. We never got around doing it because I did remember all the chimpanzee ones initially, and I was going to do a hominin thing from Homo erectus onwards and go and cover, and even earlier, and sort of cover, because I did also that's why I did the first chimp one and then I did the second one in the savannah, where the savannah chimps are starting to show early hominin behavior. Their sort of certain genes are changing, their behavior is changing as well. It's mimicking more early hominins that we evolved, eventually Homo erectus came out of. And so you can see, because of the change of the environment, they're behaving differently. They're more cooperative, less selfish, the more empathetic genes are being upregulated. All these things are changing because of the environment is pressuring them to behave differently. So this is the stuff that I actually, was trying to make a series. Look, at some point I will, but there's so much things to do, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here for, the next couple of decades, still making some of these videos, because there's just so much stuff to be made. And it's just a matter of having the time, but there's shitloads. Yeah. I may have to, that part of the N15 data, there is some stuff that will be eventually in the myths and falsehoods of veganism. So it will touch on that and a couple of other things as well. So, that in the next couple of months, I'll be doing little bits and pieces here or there, and they'll be short little videos, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, really sharp and to the point. And they'll be used as polemic for you guys to go and pin elsewhere. When somebody argues something, you'll be able to go to my playlist of the myths and falsehoods and go, let me just grab that and let me just fucking tell this annoying idiot why he's wrong. That's what I want. I want to give you guys ammo, basically, at some point. Oh, definitely. Oh, yes, very omnivorous, It's, as Bart would say, it's there. If there's no necessity in nature to change something, why change it? Vestigial organs exist in all animals. We've got a little tail. That's a vestigial organ. We don't need a tail, but it's still there, a tiny little bit, but we've still got a tail, which we haven't got rid of, because once we had a tail, but as primates, but now we don't. But it's still there as a vestigial organ that has no role, but it's still there. I mean, you will find in whales, they've still got the bones and legs inside their body. You just can't see them. They're like inside, but they are there. That's another vestigial organ which they don't use. Now, if something was to change and eventually they were, some whales were caught in shallow waters for a very long time, and let's say they weren't too shallow, but they, over millions of years, they could potentially grow those legs again and get out on the surface again. So, they could adapt in that new environment because of circumstances changing. And that's happened. We've seen animals come onto the land and then go back to the sea and back again. So that's happened. And all the different vestigial organs are basically still there, But there was no necessity. I mean, if you basically develop hunting techniques and start cutting, use tools to cut meat and stuff like that, you're not jumping like a lion too. You've got spears, you've got other tools. You don't need to make those sort of changes. So things change out of necessity. They don't change just because, a lot of animals still have, vestigial organs from earlier evolution, and they never got changed. And that is why you'll find both herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and all sorts of different animals having variations of similar type teeth and all that. I can find omnivores that have similar teeth. I can find carnivores that have, and the same thing goes for all the other variations of teeth and whatever else. At the end of the day, what you have to look at, birds, beaks, they're still carnivores and scavenger carnivores like us with a low pH, but, a number of birds that are out there, birds of prey that have got slightly higher pH than us, and then you're looking at some other vultures in particular that have got a low pH like us, 1.5, because they're scavengers. Hyenas, the same thing, and hyenas also have some different structures as well compared to other cats. So you will have vestigial there. At the end of the day, you have to see what is that animal eating, what is the N15, N14 data showing, and also you have to also look at what is their digestive system. Our digestive system altered. We've got a long small intestine and a short colon because we don't need to ferment. We don't have a cecum anymore. We've got an appendix. Things have changed because our diet has changed and our digestive system is adjusted. We've got a low pH because we're not, that's for animal products. So there are those changes, that have actually happened to the digestive tract. The other areas didn't need to be changed. There was no necessity. They still can, if you cut, with a blade, you cut with a stone blade and all that, you cut a piece of steak and all that, you lay it out and you cook it, or you basically cut it in pieces and slice it, you can still eat it. You don't need to basically change your teeth structure. And there are plenty of animals that have got different teeth structures that are, plenty of animals around that are carnivores that have got different teeth structures. So there is not one specific. It is their evolutionary necessities. Whether an animal has or hasn't has to do with the way it hunts. We don't hunt by jumping on other animals and tearing their flesh or having to have nails and stuff like that. We basically, sharks are carnivores, but they don't have those sort of teeth, and they don't basically have claws. They operate differently. We know that basically, if you look at dolphins, they have these very small teeth and all that, and they're also carnivores, as a mammal. And there are all sorts of carnivores that have got different variations around the place. So it's just illogical. It's, at the end of the day, the digestive system really tells you more than teeth and stuff like that. Yes, once upon a time, if we go really way back, even before the chimps, because the chimps also consume more omnivore, they consume a lot of animal foods and a lot of protein from animal foods, up to a ton, sometimes more than humans. And I've shown that in the videos that I've done. They're on the chats that I did with Bart. I will do a more concise one for the myths and falsehoods eventually. But this is the reality. But people want to ignore that and come up with certain spurious arguments. Oh, they don't look the same. Yes, you look at that part, but you don't look at the digestive thing, the thing that actually is involved in digesting the different types of foods. That's more important than the teeth. They ignore that part because that doesn't suit them. Yes, that's it. The Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. Thank you, Blinky. Yes. And that's what it's called, the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. and it's the, I will find it for you. Here it is, Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. Anyway. And that is basically it. They've actually changed the name to Evolutionary Anthropology. There you go. Yeah, I'll have to search it and actually find some of the information and provide it. So in Leipzig, which is Eastern Europe, East Germany, the old East Germany. Anyway, yes, precisely. Yes, don't even have teeth, precisely. Yeah, carnivores come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and everything else. So yeah, at the end of the day, you have to look at the digestive system, because even herbivores come in different shapes and sizes. Omnivores come in different shapes and sizes. You have to look at what the animal eats in the wild and what is its digestive system. So it's a much more complex thing. Is non-heme iron fortified kibble dangerous for our vegetated friends when they likely the taurine, retinol, etc.? Look, I've actually got a bit of a theory on this, that hemochromatosis is basically people that are more susceptible, because I've looked at a number of people that are on the carnivore diet that I've actually dealt with as well. And even one person that came onto one of my live streams and said, look, since I've done the carnivore diet, my sort of levels have normalized, so his ferritin levels and all the different in terms of transfer and everything sort of normalized. He doesn't have these strange sort of levels of free iron, or everything sort of normalized. And I suspect that some of these people that have got hemochromatosis are probably the genes that are involved. We haven't done the research, but I suspect that what it is they can't handle non-heme iron. And so, and if we take a look, that hemochromatosis in the past wasn't an issue. When people were eating more, getting their iron, not from fortification, from plants, fortification, because most people were, if they were eating plants in the past, nobody was eating green veggies. That wasn't really the big thing. People were eating more, like tubers and stuff like that. And, I mean, even when you got plants like cucumbers, people used to take the skin off and de-seed it, which basically gets rid of all the anti-nutrients like the lectins. And so that's what pretty much people sort of approach things quite differently in that time, which is really important. That was that. Just going through. Yep. Good one. Yeah, nice one, Blinky. Yeah. Specific features of modern humans seem to their frequent fish consumption, which can be determined by nitrogen isotope, bone or tooth collagen. And international research team led by researchers from the Max Planck Institute Evolutionary Anthropology discovered that two later Neanderthal characterized by exceptionally high nitrogen isotope ratios, which would traditionally be interpreted as a signature for freshwater fish consumption by studying the isotope ratios of the single amino acids. They, however, demonstrated instead of fish, the adult Neanderthals had a diet relying on large herbivorous animals, and that the other Neanderthals was breastfeeding babies whose mother was also a carnivore. According to those isotope data, Neanderthals seem to have had a very stable diet over time, including after the arrival of modern humans in Europe. And that is true. It's only towards the end, when they were basically forced into the Iberian Peninsula, into basically where modern day Portugal is, off the coast of the Atlantic coast, where basically there was very few of them left, and they were forced into these starvation foods. And that's what these charlatans, these crackpots, another egg, and evil, misanthropists, that is what they focus on, that. And they ignore, the tooth decay and all other issues that those people were suffering as a consequence. Yes. Thank you very, very much, Blinky. And this is from, I need to zoom out because I've zoomed too far in for the other one. And hunter-gatherer skull male, modern human skull. Exactly. That is basically it. A reduction in size and much, much narrower, not wider. That's why we have so many crooked teeth in the modern human. That's basically it. Why we have bloody, all these problems. It's not accidental, It's basically because the more kibble we eat, the more degenerate we degenerate as a species. Now, going back to this, hemochromatosis, I believe, is a non-heme iron issue, which means that if you have hemochromatosis, remember, it's not only the plants. Unfortunately, also non-heme iron is found in eggs. So you've got to give the eggs a bit of a ditch, which means that if you need your choline and folate and stuff like that, unfortunately, you will have to eat a bit of liver every day. Like an ounce every second day will basically cover you for all those requirements that you have. And the reason why I go for the lower levels is because we don't want to overload ourselves with too much copper either. Copper, we should prioritize slightly more the zinc than the copper, and that's another reason behind that. But I don't want to go into it at this stage. It's a much more complicated picture about the protein, metalloproteins that are in the gut and the regulation of that. That's for another video, another time. But basically, the non-heme, to use simplistic terminology for the rest of us, is really basically that the enzymatics are probably not there. The problem is we don't have studies, so we can't confirm it, but we do notice that people, when they ditch the plants, these hemochromatosis issues go away. And I've had two people, and there's also been a third person that popped onto one of my live streams, I think 2 weeks ago, and actually said exactly that. When I ditched, everything normalized. And I can't remember whether I told them to avoid eggs or not. I can't remember, because in that sort of circumstance, it is non-heme iron and can be a problem if you have too many. For those people who have got hemochromatosis, stick to ruminant animals and stay clear from eggs or plants that have got non-heme iron. So, yes. Anyway, the rest of us, it's a different kettle of fish. We've got abilities to deal with non-heme iron. We've got the enzymatic pathways. Anyway, notice that my food would definitely be exactly as we showed from the Institute in Leipzig, Germany. Yes. Yes, exactly. You look at it and not only frightening, it's sort of an indictment on what we've done to ourselves, an absolute indictment. Yes, exactly, zombie, making the perfect hunting machine, but much too efficient, unfortunately. It sort of sped up the decline into the kibble world. Unfortunately, that's the downside. But it just showed that humans have been innovators and ingenious in coming up with solutions to each new problem. Some of the solutions are not always the most species appropriate, unfortunately. And we're even making bigger mistakes in the modern world because of too much food propaganda from the big end of the money people. Anyway. I don't know enough about in regards to their teeth to be able to comment on that, Bert. Yes, we've pretty much covered that one. We'll move on. Cats and dogs are carnivores. Yet they domesticate themselves to us because they knew we were better at getting meat. Yes, very much. We could lavish them with either rats or meat from our tables. Yes, very much so. But unfortunately, now we feed our cats and dogs kibble. And you know what's happening? Unfortunately, cats and dogs are dying from cancer and all sorts of health problems. We're making them sick, diabetic, and prone to cancer and cardiovascular disease. Modern day cats and dogs are dying from cancer and cardiovascular disease. Actually, even some rats in New York have been found to be obese and suffering cancer, cardiovascular disease, and a number of other things because they're eating junk food that we throw out. Those Randall cycle cats and dogs and rats. Yes. All I can say is Philip Randall would be proud of them. Anyway, 7 eggs are history too. We haven't finished yet, Sam. I'm being nice to you. I could really be, put it in, but I'll be nice. I'll hold off. I'll throw a few later on. Anyway, the Neanderthal study was posted on social media as like another blow to the idea of meat-eating Neanderthals. Yeah, look, I know, it's just absolutely ridiculous and shameless, and that's why we call them. I nearly said it, Sam. These misanthropists that have the connotation starting with a C. I've got to be nice to him. I can't, Robert understands. I can't be too harsh. He'll run out of eggs for the rest of the week. Awesome explanation as why we shifted to eating plants. You're welcome. At some stage, Robert, I do want to do a series, a proper series on and looking, I sort of started initially and then we got sidetracked. We had a lot of controversy with the EMFs and all sorts of things that blew up in our community in general and on YouTube, and it just sidetracked us. And then there was a methylation thing that Bart dragged me back about a Gonji man and Goji man, and then there was all sorts of other things, and I forgot all about it because we were supposed to do, because I did with my chats with Bart, we did some of the climate stuff like the isotope analysis for the methane to show that it wasn't ruminants. Ruminants, C12 has been declining while C13 has been increasing, which comes from fossil fuels. And so they even got that wrong, the vegetarians out there. So that was another sort of bit of a at them. But out of that series of chats with Bart, we were supposed to do, I may contact him and, see whether he feels like doing at some stage some of this sort of stuff, or whether I just at some stage later this year when I've got time, I probably will do a series. Nobody else has really done a proper series of going back and looking at these adaptations and changes the story needs to be told. I've told a bit of it. I started with the chimps in the wild, and then the chimps in the savannah, and how they're changing and adapting. And then I'm sort of want to move to the early hominins and how those genetic changes and sort of tie back to the genetics as well, and those adaptations in these different environments, and really go through and explain the human story in a way never told before. Yeah, I need to do it at some point. It's just so much stuff to do. My myths and falsehoods of veganism and all sorts of bloody things that never ends. But anyway, there's more stuff. You should look forward to also my next methylation one that I'll be doing. That will be a doozy and really very informative, and will be good ammo for the carnivore community. That should be out early this coming week. So that's earmarked. And got a few other things on the board as good polemics. But yes, it's a matter of having the bloody time or putting the time aside to do them. Yes, pretty much 70%. If you look at every single thing, I mean, I know who recently did. I can't remember. Somebody recently did a really breakdown on. I can't remember. I did watch something of Nina Teichel's. I'm not sure whether. No, I don't think it was her. But it was a recent one where they looked at all these different food groups, dairy, meat, all these different things, and how they've declined since the 70s, how they've come down and all that. Since at the time when the food pyramid, the actual recommendations from the mafia panel on nutrition through the USDA started pushing their kibble, garbage, and all that, and how people shifted their diet, and that was really the shift. And you can actually see how all these categories have declined. The only things that have gone up is refined sugars and seed oils. Seed oils dramatically, to be, in some people, they're constituting well over 40% of their calories from seed oils. I mean, that stuff is poison, sheer poison, in terms of aldehydes and oxidative primary and secondary products, plus nearly double the basically the deuterium levels of even unrefined sugars. So we're talking about toxic to the body, toxic to the mitochondria, and it constitutes about nearly 40% of some of the sad dieters' diet. It's horrifying, and they wonder why all these diseases are exploding around the world. It's not surprising when you're eating that sort of shit, that you're doing direct damage to your mitochondria and your cells at a massive level and a massive rate. Yeah, blame Dylan. Poor Sam. Yeah, exactly. Oh, look, I held off. I held off. It could have been 9 and 10 at this stage. So, yes, I have been quite constrained. Even though, even if you went up to 25 eggs a day, I mean, that old geezer did it for, but so it wouldn't hurt him in that regard. But it's, I don't want to be. I don't know what his threshold is, or how comfortable he feels like swallowing raw eggs at that amount. So that's the only reason. Yes. So I don't want to put him under too much pressure. Crocodile tastes like chicken. Yes, it does. So I imagine dinosaurs do too. Yeah. Oh, well, remember, birds are dinosaurs, zombie. Chickens are tiny. Yeah, exactly. Good one. That's why they taste all like, the white sort of flesh. So one thing that I haven't actually tried is crocodile. But yes, even though look, I did go once to Darwin, but I didn't stay for long, and even if I had at that time, I had a different mindset, so I probably wouldn't have tried, crocodile. But now, with the current mindset and the more carnivorous sort of attitude and all that, I probably would. I'd go for it. Yes. So at some point, yes, that would be quite interesting. Unfortunately, you can't hunt them anymore. I wouldn't mind going in for a hunt. But anyway, that's another issue. And the thing is, if you did go hunting for crocodiles, the vegans wouldn't get too annoyed because they're not cute, furry animals. They're not really, the dinosaurs, so they don't really care about them. Ah, exactly. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Nothing like using a rock to crack. I mean, that ability to crack things with stones actually even exists amongst the chimps. It goes way back. As I've said, sometimes, I mean, last time, even though we did basically a collaboration on the chimps, I mean, last time I remember something that Bart said about, the chimps eat, that, yeah, they eat more plants and stuff like that. And, but he sometimes forgets, the study that I actually did. I mean, I pointed out to him, I said, don't you remember what I said? Chimps are highly carnivorous. They eat up to, in the wild. We're not talking about the ones that are in the zoos that are being fed kibble and getting sick. We're talking and look like shit and actually age faster than the ones in the wild. We're talking about the wild ones actually consume, and even the ones in Nigeria, the Goddard type institute there that they've got for primatology, which is full of vegetards, as one member of that group told me. She's British. I won't mention her name, but she told me that basically these people are just crackpots and they make up shit. And I'm not surprised. And the funny thing was they had to basically put a lot of earth mounds full of, insects and all that, because the chimps were fighting over, because they wanted more meat, animal foods, insects at least, get something. I suspect if you threw a small animal amongst them, they'd rip it to pieces, So they know where the quality of food is. So I think that my honest belief is that the early ancestors, the common ancestor, was basically, an omnivore, a highly carnivorous omnivore. The only thing that we made difference is as we got out in the savannah and all that, and we started basically accessing, through scavenging bigger animals and then eventually using stones to break bones and accessing more fat, it was the fat that grew our bigger brains and changed our endocrine system, the way it works. So we're able to go into ketosis much easier. We can do things that chimps can't do. They're more glycolytic, their metabolism. So there are reasons for this change where fat and ketones become prime important fuels. So, but that's for another day to go into all that detail. But that's basically the thing, that story. And that's the one thing, we need to stop calling the chimps basically frugivores or omnivores or that. They are basically quite carnivorous. If you put them, generally speaking, their digestive system is more omnivorous, but they are basically, I would call them, I'd use probably sort of semi-carnivorous generalist, which means a generalist does eat other things, when needed. But their main preoccupation is to go out in groups, the males, and go hunting expeditions. And the females, they'll go and find earth mounds and literally try and get insects with the kids. That's what they do. They sit there all day, trying to get with twigs and stuff like that, shoving it in there and trying to get, and eating all these, because that's where, animal protein is where the game is. They know it. in nature, animal eats animal, as in the majority of cases. And that's where it focuses. And so that's where it's very important that we get this information out and we stop being apologetic or whatever and hammer these people. That's my mission, to basically get the information out there and make sure that people understand what our past physiology was and our current physiology, and where things went wrong for our species and why they went wrong. Explaining the history, explaining the ApoE adaptations as a protective mechanism, why it happened. I've talked about it a bit with, I did something with Pim on that and covered that, talking about chylomicrons, the resident time and stuff like that. But I want to tie that information back to the archaeological information so it makes sense to people. So that's my, the sort of focus that I'll have. And as that story comes together, you guys will realize how much bullshit we've been told, how much absolute bullshit we've been told. But that's for another day. Yes. And thanks, Blinky, for searching the link. Oh, yeah, you're right. Right time was about an hour ago. 7 o'clock. It's nearly 8 o'clock. Blinky, you haven't been telling me. See? Now, Roy's here. You didn't want Roy, did you, Blinky? I'm going to sort you out, mate. 4 times more prevalent in Ireland, maybe a positive feature to be told upon iron due to dairy consumption. Doesn't dairy inhibit iron absorption or something? It has some level, but it's not as, let's not go to the reduction and stuff. It's overblown, the amount. It's, has a bit of an effect, but it's not as big as many people make out in that regard. And I always say to them, show me, because there's a lot of things that interact and interfere, supposedly. Vitamin D, if you have too much vitamin D, can drive down vitamin A. If you have too much vitamin A, you can drive down vitamin D. But if you have just right, good levels of each one, they synergistically work together. So is it the lack of synergy, or is it some real inhibition? There's no studies to show either way. So, we can do a reduction of studies, but then we fail to understand whether there's a synergy there. And that's the other problem. So, because if it was, we would have major deficiencies amongst pastoralists, and we don't. So I think it's a bit of bullshit. And, very much. Why, so, but the hemochromatosis thing, let's not forget that people that eat cod liver, and the Irish used to consume quite a bit in the past, they have a reduction in carotenoid conversion, and they tend to basically, be more, most of the actual iron was coming from animal sources, whether it was from the liver of cod or the other ruminants and stuff like that. They didn't have problems. Nowadays they do, because they're eating far too much non-heme iron, far too much kibble. That's all it is. It's nothing else. So obviously, if you're not ingesting as much, you don't require those mechanisms to convert. But if you're ingesting more, you do require those mechanisms. So it depends, different populations in different parts, what their exposure was to over time. So there's a lot of different things. It can be quite confusing in that regard. But I don't know enough about the Irish. I know that there are other populations that have also some of these SNPs that live in very different environments. So we don't know whether it's some sort of thing that emerged earlier in that population where it was in another region and then when they moved elsewhere. So there's a lot of confounding variables when it comes to that sort of data, because there's so much confusing data around the world in regards. But one thing that we do know, Dylan, is when people basically eliminate the non-heme iron and just focus on the heme iron, things normalize. So, it seems that once you eliminate plants and all that, these problems go away. Things seem to normalize in these people. Now, these people that I've come across, are they just accidents? We'll see. We'll find out. As more people with this sort of condition go to carnivore, there'll be more anecdotes of stories. And at some point, hopefully, they will do some sort of study. Until we get a study, all we can do is speculate, and we can say that it seems that the carnivore diet is positive for these people that have hemochromatosis. So it must be a non-heme iron issue, is my sort of speculation. And I do say speculation quite clearly, but I think that it's a strong, and I've talked about it some time now. So, what did Dave say? Narrowing the skull, yes, the vegetative community, yes. They like to have that pointy effect, to be able to point things out to us continuously. So they have to, their skull must be aligned with their pointing finger. Yes, they've got some strange thinking patterns. Actually, it happened a bit earlier. It declined slowly. So it happened much earlier. And also the ApoE genes, and a lot of people, you will hear people say, oh, the ApoE genes are all related to the agricultural. That's why it became ApoE 3.3s and 2.2s and all that. You'll hear that within the low-carb keto community constantly being peddled out that that's the case. That's false. Let me say that again. That is BS. 200,000 years. So Homo sapiens, modern humans that have been around for 350,000 years, 200,000 years ago, at a time when there was a bit of climate change on the planet and shifts, a warmer, small period, we saw a shift in some of the megafauna type things, and there was a shift in the ApoE status. That means there were some restrictions, environmental restrictions on sufficient game, and that basically brought about, probably some sort of foraging, some additional sort of, at the time, I suspect maybe a bit of tubers or whatever, about 200,000 years ago. That's why we find around that period, we do find some populations around the world where there is some increase in amyloid, the sort of changes that happened in that period, and basically there was a shift. There was a shift around that period. It was I'm trying to think now. It's about up until about 180,000 years from memory. I can't remember exactly. And that was when the ApoE 3.3 emerged. And what the ApoE3 does is basically hands a key to chylomicron remnants. So when you actually eat fat, it goes through your body via a chylomicron. So it actually, at the other side of the intestine, your small intestine, there's all these lined up chylomicrons, and they just take in, vitamins, minerals, and fats and stuff like that into them, and then they circulate around that, going through the lymphatic system, through the thoracic duct, right through the heart, and then eventually back to the liver as a remnant chylomicron. The remnant chylomicron then needs to get an ApoE key, little key, to basically access the receptor site on the liver and basically get inside. If you're basically on a species appropriate diet, that's not a problem. That's why our ancestral one was 4-4. Immediately handed over the key, and fat went into the liver immediately. And then it was recycled as triglycerides and sent out as VLDL, blah, blah, blah. And, based on energy, circulating energy and all that. That was on an ancestral diet, which included very little sugar or none at all in most cases. Then, once we started this climate sort of change period, the first stage, because the climate was actually changing. And, if you take a look, when you look at studies of climate change, it doesn't happen like smoothly like that. It actually, has these little jagged where it will go up and down and up and down, and it will go through these spasmodic sort of changes, slowly adjusting and moving through the different cycles. And so that was one of the cycles that where the interglacial period, a warmer period happened, and certain, other calorie stuff, which we went under after, free food, free calories, additional calories. Animals also always are seeking calories. They try to maximize calorie intake or access to calories. And obviously, when you have a bit more sugar, not a lot, but a bit more seasonally and all that, what happens is you can engage the Randall cycle. You can create insulin resistance. You can create hepatic pressure, stress. So liver stress, hepatic. Anyway, and as a consequence, what happened was we want to slow down. If you've got sugar in the liver, you don't want to be basically putting a whole lot of fat in the liver at the same time and overloading the liver. So what you do is you slow down the uptake. And that's what the ApoE 33 does. It basically slows down when it hands the key from the HDL to the chylomicron. The HDL has a role to play. It hands over the key to the chylomicron to go in. So in order for it to go in, it needs that key. And so what happens is it slows it down. So it means that it provides like a buffering system, so you don't get too much fat going in at the same time as there's sugar there. It's a buffering system, a protective mechanism. About 80-odd thousand years ago, and this is between that other period of 125,000 years to 75,000 years, again, this sort of interglacial type, this shift in climate. The weather in that period was very chaotic. It was so chaotic, it was considered like, you would have 1 year flooding in an area, and the next year basically just complete. It was dry as a bone. It was so chaotic in a number of parts. And as a consequence of that, what happened was, these irregularities actually brought about the ApoE22 in a number of these populations in some of these areas that were affected by massive climate shifts. And it was basically another adaptation where, access to certain foods became slightly limited, where they had to use more starvation foods, which basically meant that you had to slow down the uptake of fats even more, so you wouldn't create these, stresses on the liver, hepatic stresses. So again, it's the 2-2 is a slowdown, but that only affected a very small amount of people. That's why to this day, it's only about 4% of the population of the world that has that. Very small amount. The Chinese and certain other populations tend to have higher amounts of that. It's probably been strongly because of their dietary for the last couple of thousand years has become more pronounced. But still, primarily most humanity is basically 3-3s, and, very small amounts are ancestral. And they are the ones that are more vulnerable, the ancestral, because they uptake things far too quick and actually get fatty liver at a much higher rate as well, and all these sort of health issues. So, that's what these changes happened. So a lot of these things do take place, but the actual reduction in brain size actually happened a bit earlier, around about 100-odd thousand years ago. So it was that period when, you were getting that sort of climate change through the 125,000 to 75,000 years, and, very chaotic, and food supply was becoming more vulnerable. And then that vulnerability actually exacerbated, because we were exploding in population, but the megafauna was still declining. So access to food became even more scarce. and more harder. That's why we eventually, got into using animals like dogs, wolves, to basically maximize, it was like the last hurrah, so to speak, in that time. And that's part of that story. But it's been a slow change in the ApoE, plus these declines in brain size as well, of about 200 cc in that period. So it's a dramatic change from Cro-Magnon man to modern humans, which we call Homo sapiens sapiens. Anyway, I think I went too much into that. That is for a future video to go into more detail. I probably said too much. Got carried away. Yes. Far too much carried away. Poach. Oh, you're going to do a poached egg as well. Oh, well. You'll have to wait until you can't do it immediately. You'll have to wait until I call it out, It's remember in that Monty Python thing where they had the crosses ready to go. Wait for it, crucifixion squad. Wait for it. Everybody ready to go. So Sam, wait for it. Oh, you can buy crock meat. Oh, that's pretty good. Kind of like tuna. Tastes like chicken. Don't all dinosaurs taste like chicken? Zombie. Yeah, it'll be a while before we get barramundi down here, but in Tassie, but definitely it'll be a while before we get anything like that, unfortunately. Yes. Yes, definitely. We look at most populations around the world, all the populations through the Pacific, because you can't actually put ruminant animals on the Pacific Islands. Even though a lot of their calories come from coconut, about 50-odd%, a bit of fish, but the majority of their meat basically comes from pork, lard, pork primarily. It's very easy. You just put a piglet on a boat and sail to the next island. And that's why it was what it was. So chimps have been hunting little piglets as well. So it goes way back, even before humans existed. So how can a food that's been evolutionary tied to us as food for so long, for millions of years, be bad for us? It's actually been part of our diet even before ruminants. So, so the anti-pig sentiment is absolutely so stupid and so bullshit. And if you look at the longevity populations, like the Okinawans, the Sardinians, and many of the Greeks on many of the islands, they consume quite a bit of pork products, and we have for a very long time. So, yes. And the biggest consumption was in the past, in the 19th century, early 20th century, in the US even, was basically lard and pork. There wasn't a lot of cattle that was being consumed back then. It was primarily lard and pork. Yes, again, fatty meat. And also a very good, let's not forget, a very good source of vitamin D as well. Let's not forget, compared to other animal flesh. Have mercy on my soul. First discovered the smell of cooking bacon. Great evolutionary moment. I think they were ripping it to bits and eating it raw in those days. Yes. I have to say, I do love bacon. I can sometimes, I'll go literally and get like 300 or 400 grams of bacon, and I'll just cook it in one hit. I'll just cook them all and just eat them and binge out on bacon. So yeah, I have those days. Oh yes, once they tasted bacon, there was no going back. Ah yes, exactly. There's a sexual innuendo there as well, but I won't get into that. Excommunicated. Oh yes. Ah yes. That's why I love my subs. They all are bacon aficionados. Ah yes. Ah yes, those anti-bacon, anti-salad boy heretics, carny heretics. We should get the Inquisition on them. Oh God. Most porn in Australia is local, but there's zombie Freudian slip. uh, oh, thanks for the laugh. Yes, yes. A lot of the cured stuff does come from, I do get some Italian and some Spanish cured meats. But we do have some local stuff here in Tassie. We're actually lucky. A lot of our stuff, the majority that I get is from pastured pork, free range pastured pork from from the butchers down at Cygnet in the southern part of Tasmania, and they basically get from local producers. So it's really nice stuff. And I actually get the one that I actually get the one is it's basically, it's got nothing, it's just basically cured salt and smoked. Oh man, is that nice. God, I could even eat that raw. I can just sit there, the smoked flavor. Oh God, it's divine. I mean, I think I've shown you that one, which is nitrate free and it's pastured, free range pork with it's smoked. It's, oh man, it's nice. That is really nice stuff. As good as sex. That's a comment for zombie. Ah, yes, yes. Nothing like pork belly. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Yes. Actually, barbecuing pork belly. Nice. Yes. Or roasting it even. I've roasted it, barbecued. I've done everything to it. Oh, God. You're making me hungry. Oh, God. I need some liquids. Maybe I love beef and fish more because of my equatorial genes. Maybe. Don't know. I don't mind fish. I mean, as I said, last night I had fish. But when it comes to ruminants, I've got more of a. I don't look. Not that I don't like beef, but if you were to basically lay pork, beef, and lamb, I'd go first for the pork, then for the lamb, and then for the beef last. So not that I don't mind. I don't like beef. I do. But I really love pork and I really love lamb as my second best ruminant. Or, okay, it's I know it's not pigs are not ruminants, but when I'm talking about land-based animals, maybe that's the word that I should use. Yes, they're monogastric, eat anything, land-based animal, the pig. Yes. Regarding pigs eating trash and so far, some immunity to snake venom too. Yeah, look, their digestive system has really high levels of detoxification compared to all other animals, including us. That's why it's really hard to make pork sick as a meat, because they've got such great detoxification. So that's one advantage that they've got. They can detox pretty well compared, and that's why they can just basically eat absolutely filth or live in their own filth. Other animals would die in the same circumstances, but not the pig. It will live in filth and mud and anything, in excrement all day long. And it's because it's got fantastic detoxification abilities. And that's why, it can do even better on grains than even other ruminants. Other ruminants get very sick. The pig doesn't. It'll eat anything. So it's got really good detoxification. It can detox. You find in pigs much lower levels of even glyphosate and stuff like that, or very little or none. Even in countries where they are actually eating just anything, they feed them anything. Where ruminants, like ruminant cows and stuff like that, or they tend to have far more in their flesh. They're not as good at detoxifying, because they were more designed to eat grass. That's why. So if you're forced under circumstances to eat low quality meat, I'd always go for pork before I went for anything else. I mean, remember the study that I showed you about the rat that they induced deliberately colon cancer, and then they gave it bacon, and the bacon didn't cure, but basically was cancer protective. That means it was reducing the cancer severity that they'd induced, where all the other meats and the other foods didn't. So, all those charlatans out there that bag, pork and bacon and stuff like that and say it's not good for the colon and all that sort of stuff. What a load of garbage. Absolutely a load of garbage, So it's all there, it's all those studies where they put seed oils with the lard and then they accuse the lard as being the fault. I mean, give us a break. When you put sugar, dextrose, high amounts of dextrose, glycating everything, and then put high amounts of seed oil, which is damaging to the lipids, peroxidation and all the other stuff, oxidation, aldehydes, ripping everything to pieces. And then you add some lard and say, oh, it's the lard's fault. That's the crackpot bullshit studies that they do with rats and stuff like that. Yeah, pisses me off. That's why when I come across these studies where people say, oh, look at this study, I say, let me just look at what was the rat being fed? And then I look at what it's being fed. I see, obviously, all these high deuterium foods, foods that are oxidized, highly rancid, blah, blah, blah. I just go through the whole list and I say, well, that's just bullshit. Show me one where pork on its own causes any of these problems. They can't find anything. But then I pull up the one with the rat and where they induced cancer, and the bacon was protective. And that's a shocker. That's a baseball bat hit to the head, and the vegetarian realizes, I just got knocked out. Yes, exactly. No, Bjorn, I didn't claim that. I'm not making that claim. then I'd really sound like a crackpot if I made that claim. I said it's protective. God. I wonder if different breeds of pigs have different nutrient ratios, like the Stone Age wild looking pigs versus the ones that everyone eats. Yeah, that they do have some differences. Off the top of my head, I can't remember all the differences. There's some micronutrient differences as well. Some of the fatty acids are slightly different, but not massively. It's not like, a cow and a pig where there's, quite a bit of difference. They are slightly different, but not massively. But there is some differences in the micronutrient status of some of these animals. Yeah, it depends also. Some stuff is slightly higher, some stuff is slightly lower, but it's not massive. So I wouldn't get too wound up about that. The flesh tends to be slightly redder, the wild ones, so because they're eating less grains and less other types of things. So it's probably a factor that's playing in there. But it's not a massive difference anyway. If you find free-range pigs, their flesh is slightly more redder, less white. So there is a bit of a difference. But when you cook it, it all goes a bit, that color. It's just the way pig flesh actually gets affected by heat. Just the way it is. But it's not like massive. Everybody's got a bit of a different style. Yeah, where mine probably is, like seafood is probably about, let's say about 15%. Eggs probably constitute about, 10%. It varies. Sometimes it can be down to 5%, sometimes 10%. It can vary with me. Eggs, sometimes I really get into heavy egg eating, and other times I just don't feel like eating a lot, and I use my choline supplement at that stage, or eat a bit of extra liver, depending how much I've got in the fridge at the time. So that's sort of varies. The majority, so it's about 15%. Then eggs, most of the time it's about 5%. So that's 20. There's about organ meats are probably at the same level, 5%, and probably when it comes to chicken, because it's once a week, about that amount, which is about 35. So about 65% comes from beef, lamb, and pork. And it usually tends to be, out of that, 2/3 is pork, and the other 1/3 is a sort of a mix between beef and lamb, and it varies from week to week depending. So oops. I suspect so as well. Yep. Have mutations of the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, protects against snake venom. Okay. Very interesting. I didn't know that. Preventing a neurotoxin from binding. Yep. Always is, It's the binding stuff, Does this tie in with a way to some of the us taking niacin? I don't think it's going to basically have the same effect in us, because it's a receptor, whether it binds or doesn't bind. It's like even viruses, they can be benign, they can be beneficial, they can be nasty, because sometimes they can be beneficial. Why would a virus be beneficial? If it infiltrates a pathogenic bacteria and compromises it, that's beneficial. If it's just benign because it can't use any receptors to replicate. If it's, if it can exploit a receptor, then it basically can become pathogenic. And how much pathogenic depends on how good the body is, in what state it is as well. So you'll still get the pathogenesis of it, but whether it'll kill you or make you very sick or just mildly sick will depend on what state your terrain is. Not that I believe in the one theory or the other, but what I'm saying is it depends on your immune, how that is. That doesn't support one theory or another. It just basically says that it does make a difference. It's a marriage of the two that I make, which is more logical. Anyway, yeah, but thanks for that, Sam. Yeah, we've got good free range pork down here. Look, we've got a pretty, I mean, we also had laws in to reduce, like, for better animal protection laws in Tasmania. So, like caging and stuff like that. Much of that is much more limited in Tasmania for a lot of things. So it's not as bad as parts of the mainland. So we tend to have more animals out there foraging, our eggs. There are a number of companies now that actually have, chickens that forage. I can understand why there's much more predators that have, like introduced pet species and pests on the mainland that can be a problem for, and the cost of having a lot of chickens or other animals out, smaller animals that can be attacked by such things. Where in Tasmania, there are many parts that they don't exist. So there's less of a risk in that regard. So there's a lot of other factors at play for a lot of these things. 14 eggs down. Bloody hell! Did I use that word too so many times? God Almighty! You're a champ, Sam. In archaeology, are the spots on the iron-deficient skeletons due to iron's role in collagen formation? Well, it does play a role. It's involved. Pigs has more fat, does it? Yeah, okay. Interesting. I may have to look it up, see whether I can source some to try some out. That would be interesting. I need to take a trip to Hungary, Romania, pork holiday. Yes. Yeah, Hungary and Romania do consume Hungarians. I know that Laszlo Boris, the guy that does all the deuterium stuff, he loves absolutely, because deuterium isotopes, in pork are very low. I mean, the lowest they'll get is about 115 parts per million. They can be a bit higher than that as well, but mainly, I think they don't really go that high. 117, I think the average is around 116, but 117 is usually when they're eating some other grains or stuff like that. Even there, because they've got a lot of detox and really good capacity, and they all can reduce their deuterium levels much more effectively than other animals, which is a good thing. Pigs are very good deuterium depleters as well. I mean, they're not as good as camels. Camels are the ultimate deuterium depletion machine. Their level of deuterium depletion is basically the best of the best, So, yes. Unfortunately, we humans aren't as good. But pork is much better at deuterium depletion than many other animals. But it's probably the reason why pork is like lard is lower in deuterium than tallow or butter. It's probably the reason why, because they are such good detoxifiers, deuterium depleters. They're pretty good in that regard as an animal. So, but obviously camels would probably, if you're looking at all the animals, which animal has the lowest deuterium in its flesh and fat, it'd probably be camel. It may be the reason, this is sheer speculation on my part because we've got no research. It may be the reason why camel milk and camel products seem to have certain benefits for people. People say that they drink camel milk, or they consume camel fat, or, camel flesh, and they say that it has some magical properties that really improves their health if they're very sick. Maybe it's the deuterium depletion that they're actually undergoing. By eating those foods, they're getting less deuterium. They're improving their mitochondrial function. That's probably where it's coming from, So, be interesting. I've never tried any camel product. Some stage I'll have to try and access somewhere. Very hard in Tasmania. We don't have any deserts here to have roaming camels around the place. Ah, yes, yes. Nothing like Spanish salami. Ah, yes. To slaughter. Oh, Robert, my man, my best friend. You guys are, oh, that sounds pretty good. It does sound very good. Yes. I need to try and access some of this sort of stuff. I lied. I also have brie and wine every weekend. Yeah, look. Yes, brie is a favourite of mine. As all the cheeses, brie comes first. Yeah. I just need to be careful because it has quite a bit of fat in it as well. And I can sit there and consume quite a lot of it in one session. I can be a guts when it comes to brie. Really? Okay. That sounds interesting. Yeah, look, we don't have that breed in Tasmania anyway. So, oh, really? Okay. If you do find a supplier that will actually send, a stuff around different parts of Australia, drop me an email, Zombie. I'd really like to access. That's if you can actually get it, if they can supply it to Hobart. If they can't, I mean, it's a waste of time emailing me anything. But if they can supply beyond Queensland, yeah, I'd bloody love to get my hands on some and try it. Probably the milk is going to be a difficult thing, but even if I can get the meat, would be nice to try it. Yeah, some can be expensive, but now and then, it's nice to basically splurge out a bit of money on quality stuff. If you can afford it. I understand some people don't have the same have got far more financial constraints. So, we have to be mindful of that. Coles here sells camel burgers. What? Oh, they've been loaded of veg oil and grains. Okay. I won't buy them. Okay. Why would they bloody do that, hubby? Freaking hell. This is what pisses me off. They take a quality food and they poison it. Modern day supermarket food. Bloody hell. Dunning, my man. Someone that's been lucky and adventurous. Yeah, look, I've heard a lot of positive things that a number of people with all sorts of ailments, and I think it's the deuterium in camel milk, and probably some other. It does have two advantages. One, it's got lower deuterium. The other factor that I do know it has higher levels of lactoferrin compared to all other milks, excluding human milk, which is I believe is one of the highest. But camel milk has some of the highest levels of lactoferrin, which is really good in binding things that need to be taken out. So it seems to have a lot of really strong benefits, but I don't know the entire profile. But yeah, I would love to try some as well. Yes. Yeah, horse milk is. I've heard a lot about horse milk, but I've never tried it myself, so I can't really comment. I'd love to get my hands on it, but local shops near me used to sell camel milk, but their supply has stopped since COVID. I'm still working on it. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit like that. I know that in New Zealand they've had some issues as well because they used to get a lot of raw milk. They've got special dispensers in a number of areas, and some of that got affected as well from COVID, like a lot of other things, our lives in general. Yes, it's. I didn't realise I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom of the. God, I've done pretty well while I've been talking. I've been smoothly walking through your comments and just making passing comments. Did you like that style, Blinky? You know, really subtly moving through the comments. Camel milk was like 15, 20 bucks a litre. Shit. That is expensive. I do have access to eel pure raw milk now, but I've prefer made by cow. Yep. Yeah, I still buy made by cow as well. That's the only raw milk that's available in Tasmania, unless you go to an island on the state here that I should not mention, that you may potentially access raw goat milk, but that's only a sheer speculation by me for the authorities to know that I'm just speculating. I'm not saying anything. Let's move on. Did you perfect your ice cream? No, I didn't. A lot of recipes always specify to use a powdered form of all the sweetener. I tried to do it slightly different, and I made an absolute fucking mess of it. I tried different combinations, tried eggs, non-eggs, and different styles. I'm going to try again next week and give it another go. One style wasn't too bad. I sort of ended up putting more of the vanilla extract in it, and it seemed to basically give it a nicer taste. And I ended up putting a bit extra alcohol sweeteners. But I'm trying to get that sort of creamy vanilla effect, and I've really haven't managed it. So I'm disappointed with myself. Let's put it that way. I do. Do I? Let me check. You've got mail, Harry. Yes. Those famous words. Oh, better log in. It's the thing with Proton Mail. It pops out, comes in, comes out. Oh, you got an image for me. Thanks, Alex. That's nice. Stop laughing, Harry, and just show the damn thing. God almighty. Nice teeth. Yes. That man looks cute, like a cute pussy. That's Roy's comment for the day. Yes. Perfect mail. Thanks, mate. G'day, Neff. Good. So Neff went away, went to sleep, came back, and woke up. I thought Loki may appear because he left the actual stream, and he said, because I left earlier because I had to go somewhere. And then he goes, fantastic. And then basically, yeah. What happened? Made by cow is double the price here than over east. What? Shit. Is that must be the crisis because of all the transport issues and all that? Yeah, probably. Yes. Can we get back to normality, please? Too much of this shit is driving us all mad. But, oh, God. Selected multiple things and it froze the damn thing. So head to, yes. Thomas, good to see you, mate. Other person has spoken up. I saw an article indicating that uncured, unmarinated pork causes platelet aggregation. Is there any reason to believe such? Nah. Absolutely not. What was the mechanism that they said? I'd be interested. God almighty. The vegetard said that. It must be a vegetard academic. Can't be anything else. Put up the study if you've seen the article, just so we can take a look at it and have a few laughs, because that's what I'll do. I'll just have a few laughs because it's just absolutely bonkers and stupid. But what do you expect from vegetards and stupid media out there? We have pure raw milk. Ah, yes. Called Cleopatra milk. Ah, that sounds pretty good. I can have a milk bath. It's one thing I probably should do one of these days. I've had every other sort of bloody concoction that I've thrown into the bath to, I bought this other sort of stuff which warms you up and all that sort of stuff. Better show that of trouble. Oh, nice one, trouble. And yesterday I fell asleep to Harry's stream. Wake up to Harry's stream. So cool. Exactly. Raw milk and my kids. LOL, my 9-year wants to try camel milk. Good for the 9-year-old. Smart kid. They don't want the veggies. They want the milk. The animal food. Yes, yes. Roy is having one of those special cute pussy days. And to crawl into bed. Thanks, Harry, and nice people. See you, Richard. Good seeing you here, mate. Always a pleasure having you around. No mechanism was offered. They had a few photos of the blood after ingesting pork or versus ingesting beef, lamb. And I will try to find the article and forward it to you. Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's just garbage. It's a bit like the one that they did with the burgers in the the recent vegetarded movie. That stupid piece of garbage. The what was it called again? Waste of space anyway. Where they actually looked at the blood of different people, eating different burgers. First of all, there was no carnivore burger there at all. So if there had been a carnivore burger, there would have been less triglycerides, because when you're on a carnivore diet, you generate less triglycerides. You are producing more free fatty acids. So first of all, that wouldn't be the case. And you have less sugar and fats in the bloodstream because you're sparing sugar for the brain and through gluconeogenesis demand driven. And basically free fatty acids are being taken up so quickly because the tissue needs it. And that's why you end up with higher amounts, because VLDL converts into IDL and then to LDL. That's why you end up with a higher level of LDL, because you're left with the remnant leftovers, because you've taken up all that energy of the energy that has come out in VLDL form. So another reason. And you won't see anything, but those crackpots were basically saying that, here's the burger, and that was it was a sad diet against the vegan. But even the sad diet that had the meat patty in it, if you took a look at it, yes, there was a bit of more clouding because probably engaging the Randall cycle, so more of that stuff remained in the bloodstream. One thing, but then again, the other thing that wasn't pointed out, if you took a look at the white part, which is the white, blood cells, that's on the omnivore one, there was less. On the vegan one, there was more. What does that indicate? More inflammation. So their shit burger, plant-based burger, with all the additional seed oils and crap and all that, was generating more inflammation. That's why the white part was much bigger. You know, you're not engaging the Randall cycle, obviously, so you're going to have less stuff in the bloodstream to create the cloudiness. So that would explain that. But you've got more inflammation there because you're eating a species inappropriate diet. Yes, crap on crap on crap. Where am I? I've lost my place. There is now a significant evidence to show that insulin inhibits autophagy. That's true when it goes up. And it has been shown that SARS-2 inhibits also autophagy via the same pathway as insulin does. Yep, I've heard that about SARS-2, which is the current incarnation, because the other one was called SARS-1. Yes, very good in that regard. Yes, insulin is the problem. When you're engaging the Randall cycle, insulin goes up. It definitely does. Got something here. How does pork sausage affect the blood? Okay, so that's this study here. Follow-up investigation of pork study using live blood in many cultures have traditional sausage baking with pork. There are numerous preparations of pork, raw, stuffed, casings, herbs, spices, blah, 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 cured sausages. Cured before, there's also certain traditions in blah, blah, blah method. So what do they say? A small pilot investigating the effects of blood on consumption. Let me just get rid of that. Share that. Increase the amount. I don't know how is that coming through well enough. Compared the effects of consuming sauerkraut with pork sausage. This study is a follow-up investigation to the pork study that I conducted in 2011, published in Wise Tradition, which compared the effects of blood effect on the blood after eating fresh pork chops, marinated, unmarinated bacon, and also blah, blah, blah. Procedures, subjects fasted overnight, laboratory pilot results. Okay, so what are they? A few blood photographs, mostly for consuming the pork sausages. Uniformly, rounds with no debris or clotting factors seen in the blood 4 hours after consuming pork. Stuck 30 minutes of consuming subject reported fatigue, brain fog, and wanted to lie down. Blood samples of subject consuming pork, sauerkraut is shown and looks normal and healthy 5 hours after consuming pork. And sauerkraut blood is similar, shown in 4. Moreover, subject reported staple consuming meals. How does pork sausage affect the blood? There's no clear-cut answer from the results observed of these 3 studies. Rather, individual differences were seen. One subject in particular responded adversely to pork sausage in this study, as seen in the blood figure 2 compared to figure 1. So they're looking at difference. Now, what else was in the diet? Was it the sauerkraut? Was it, because there are other things, and maybe what do these other people normally eat? So could there be other factors? Maybe some genetic factors. We know people have some sort of to certain meats and certain foods, like eggs and other things, that can react in certain ways. So anyway, I would have to go through and detail look at that in that regard. But a food that's been around for a very, very long time is unlikely to be causing these problems. There's probably other factors that may have not been addressed. I'd have to look at the data, and if I was, I'd have to also not only look at the data, but if there wasn't enough information, I would have to contact the researcher and ask them for a specific supplemental to provide details about these people and all that. You just can't, it's very hard, just going on sheer stuff without enough details is very hard. But yeah, as we saw, if basically something is a causal thing, you would see it in both people. Yep, exactly. This is the one, Thomas. Yep. So I suspect that's the one that's being referred to by the Western A. Price Foundation. They talk about this research here in that regard. But I would say that and they're looking at fibrin and stuff like that further down. Yeah, you'd have to find out what else was in the pork sausage in that regard to find out what's actually happening, because we're seeing very different effects here with some people. So some people have worse, less after, post. So when you look at that, this person after, post effect is different. There's no difference, So, and this is just with a pork. But I don't know what's in the pork either. There could be other things in the pork, and the sauerkraut could have some protective effect for these people. Hard to say. You really have to go into the details and work out exactly what is in the pork product that the sauerkraut may be binding to it as well. Compounds in the sauerkraut. It's very hard, but you'd have to look at it. But when you actually look at specific stuff in terms of species stuff, you don't see these things. So, yes, the confounders are, yes. Yeah, me neither. Not necessary. Not required whatsoever. The genes know what to do. If you eat it appropriately, they'll do certain things. If you eat properly, they'll do certain things. It's just nonsense, the rest of it. Yeah, basically it's just crap, beyond that. Exactly. Our diet cures these sort of things. Exactly, Dave. Exactly. Congrats. That's what I say as well. Guys, we're down to 5 minutes until 9 o'clock when I pull the plug. So just making you guys aware that we're getting close to that point of pulling the plug on all this sort of stuff. Element, I'm lucky and privileged to live in a country with universal health care, exactly, where we don't need to have physical exams, and I understand where others are coming from. Yep, exactly. I mean, as I said, when I had my heart type condition, I just walked into the emergency, and the next day I was having surgery and getting it sorted. And other people in other parts of the world are thinking, how am I going to pay for this? And am I going to die, or am I going to basically bankrupt my family? So yes, me too. Zombie, I agree. I know other people have different opinions, but yes, I would say a universal system is much better. I mean, we don't have a pure universal system. We do have also where people have the option to take additional coverage through private to get other non-life threatening things like, whether it's facelifts or whether it's other sort of procedures to get them quickly done and stuff like that, you can apply. So you've got that option. But in terms of emergency care, yeah, Australia's pretty good in that regard, I have to say. Not a problem, Dave. As usual, thanks. I appreciate everybody for being here and all that. And you guys basically bring up new information, some of the images, some contributions by different people with all the little nice images, which I really enjoy them. I literally go through all these sort of things and get and literally get a laugh out of them. I mean, so because you guys put effort in there to, and it's not sort of vulgar, but it's it's part of the comical sort of stuff, the vegans, the carnies, and all this, and it's all that sort of thing, and that interplay that we have, and that's really nice. I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And the one, we are carnivores, yeah, that one. That's a nice one as well, with the big fangs. So yeah, in that regard. Oh, exactly. Yeah, look, I remember a friend of mine, he was out of Hawaii, and he was telling me how, Nick was telling me, I won't mention his surname, but, he was telling me how his brother in the US was basically down with, had found that he had heart condition or whatever, or cancer. I can't remember what it was now. It's a while. I think it was, and basically he was scared that he was going to die, and he didn't want to basically, he decided, I'm going to die. I'm not going to basically sell my house. I'm going to leave that to my kid. And he asked his brother, could he look after his kid? I mean, when a society that can basically produce, spend $700 billion on arms, and outspend every single nation on the planet multiple times over, and can't basically provide basic, that sort of care, critical care for those sort of people, there's something wrong with the country as far as I'm concerned, and I don't give a shit about your politics over there. There is something wrong with your country if you can't provide whatever system, it's bloody sad, that people have to get to that stage where they have to become either bankrupt or basically, leave their kids nothing just to try and survive. And there's no guarantee. You could die on the operating table and basically you lose everything, and your kid loses everything as well. So there's something wrong with the system if you get to that level. And it's basically the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry in the US and all that. That's where it's the worst, the most corrupt and evil type system in terms of that, where it's making people very sick very fast and then providing them with very shit and highly profitable medicalized systems. And that's why medical care in the US is double the cost of any other country, because these companies are profiteering, and allowed to profiteer at the expense of the population. And at the same time, there's very poor service in comparison to many other countries. Countries that have universal systems have some problems. That means it takes a while to get, you can be on a waiting list, but that's triage. So if you're critical, they'll take you immediately. If you're not critical, you've got something minor and all that, they say, well, go through the private system. That's why people, if they're doing sports or things like that, who could sustain certain injuries, do take the private system, because they don't want to be on a waiting list. They want to go in, fix it, and get out again and get into that. And that's what they pay for. They pay for those specific coverages on that sort of stuff. And there's no problems of having the sort of private government mix, but the bulk of the emergency stuff is covered universally, and that's a better system. You don't have to bankrupt yourself to survive or to deal with cancer or major health issues. So that's my opinion anyway. Some people may disagree from the US, but I don't give a shit. I'll tell it how it is. I consider the society over there very uncivilized, that puts profits before humans, as far as I'm concerned, you know. But that's my opinion. I've linked this study saying autophagy deals with the before the immune system kicks in, and the YouTube shadow banned the comment. Just email it to me, Sam. Just email it to me. It's a bloody problem with YouTube. You just email it to me, and I'll read it, look at it. Yep, I'm always interested in looking at and trying to pull apart stuff, nonsensical stuff, and work out why people are making certain claims or why certain claims are. Usually, when you look in it, you find why, or you find culprits or things or confounding variables that, you know. Sometimes you don't, because basically these people do not provide. But when you can actually, but remember, even that study there showed some people had no effect, some people did have an effect. So there is another factor, because the common thing that they were all eating was pork. But some people have it showing an effect and some people weren't. So there must be another confounding variable, because like tobacco, with the Bradford Hill criteria, what have I said? Is a dose dependence. If something's bad, it will affect everybody uniformly. If something's good, you know, if you reduce it, you'll get better. You can't have some people getting better and some people getting worse doing the same thing. There must be some other confounding variable that has not been identified properly. That's what I'd be looking into, try and find what it is, out of curiosity than anything else. But the moment you see a scatter plot, and that's a very limited study, doesn't have a lot of people in it, so it statistically it's irrelevant. But when you actually create a scatter plot and you've got points here, there, and everything, there's no linear relationship. That means the inference is strong, linear along the actual increase and the decrease. If it's all scattered around and not on that linear line, it basically means it's statistically insignificant, and there must be other confounding variables, which we haven't identified. That's all. I'm just curious what the other stuff, maybe something in the pork that some people are reacting to, that they've added, you know, maybe a bit of seed oil or something, and some people are react more, or sugar, and some people react a bit more. Who knows? It would be interesting to find out what the other elements are in there, and what is their sort of biological sort of situation as well. So sometimes, unfortunately, some of these researchers will not give you the day. And I've had cases where I've contacted researchers, try and get information, and they've told me to take a hike. And, you know, what do? You just basically say, well, you know, when you look at something, you basically just say, well, I've got not enough information to say either one way or another, so you just leave it and move on. And as long as you can find research that basically shows that there is a difference, it tells you that there is something else at play. Because, you know, it's like, you know, the shark attack and the actual ice cream. Yeah, it's associated, but it's not causal. You know, because people can eat ice cream in inland and they don't have shark attacks. And it's the same thing here. Some people are eating pork, no effect, or getting even better, and others eating pork and having less favorable outcomes. So it's not the pork, it's something else that's in there, or some maybe a genetic, maybe, but unlikely. Because on a U curve, there's very few outliers, as the majority will be in. So it's usually another component in that mix that is basically affecting these people some way. I don't know what's in there, so hard to say. But it's always, I'm curious about these things, you know. But that's the way to tease them apart. When people say that, you say, well, hold on. You've got people here that are responding positively and people that are responding negatively. There must be other confounding variables that either have been measured but not talked about, or have been missed altogether, and so we've got no linear relationship. So very important that. Anyway. Oh, that's the COVID one. I don't think I've seen this one. I'll take a look at it. I'll take a bit of a squeeze myself. Thanks for that. Yes, and yes, definitely. Yes, those governments and their idiotic advice. It's not only the US, there's a few other countries that Australia, a few other countries that do give bad advice as well, unfortunately, in that regard. Yes. Yes, it's very much a profit-driven system, unfortunately. Ivermectin is pretty good as well. I think ivermectin, I've looked at some of the recent research and all that, and it's really good. I mean, in a number of countries, when they've actually employed ivermectin, there's been a dramatic reduction, not in the amount of cases, but the deaths. So the deaths have gone from very high numbers down to practically levels which are below that of the flu or just common colds or just the common variety. So ivermectin is really nipping it in the bud when it's used. I think India recently has talked about that they will adopt ivermectin as a part of the protocol. But unfortunately, not all India is on board, which is a bit of a problem. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I know that in other parts of the world where they've used it, the last one I think I saw was in Mexico, where the percentages dropped from, I think it was about 280% down to 6%. So that's a dramatic. That is sort of the linear connection. That is massive statistical strength, where quite clearly this thing is dose dependent. You remove it, the deaths go up. You take it out, you put it in, the deaths go down dramatically. It's like that other one that I showed with the MTHFR and riboflavin. You put riboflavin in, it corrects the thing, and immediately the line goes down in terms of homocysteine dropping dramatically. There's no ifs or buts. That will go up or down depending on whether you put that thing in or not. It's quite clear. In that other case, it's varied. And when you have a varied effect, there's obviously another confounding variable. Again, ivermectin, quite clear, dose dependent, fulfills the Bradford Hill criteria for epidemiology to infer, that it has therapeutic value. And I hope more countries take it up, and basically, we don't have to lock our societies to the same extent, and we're able to nip it in the bud very quickly, these sort of outbreaks. We'll see what happens. It's still interesting to say anything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. The CSIRO, which is our chief medical organization in Australia, is promoting low carb. Exactly. And why? Because basically it's a government organization, and it looks and says, what does work to bring down the cost for the government? And that's exactly it. And that's why they're promoting it, because they've done the studies and they've actually shown that it works. In the US, even if they do the studies, they just ignore them, because the pharmaceutical businesses and the food businesses and the private medical establishment basically has corrupted the system to such a level, and it's got the politicians around its finger, and all the media saying, oh, it's socialism, if you basically have universal coverage as a consequence. But the problem is none of the Democrats or Republicans, none of them basically are really putting in a proper universal system. It's a joke. proper universal system would be run by having economies of scale and run by government. And it would eliminate all the costs and all the duplication and all the actual garbage. And then you'd have private coverage. You still have private hospitals, but they would provide the non-essential, where people would get, like in Australia, they get private cover insurance to cover the non-essentials. So if you don't want to wait in a waiting list, you can get stuff. So the Australian system is even better than the Canadian, where the Canadian is more restricted in that regard. It's, where you have to wait for a very long time because it's only government. Where in Australia, there's for immediate stuff, the government. For non-immediate stuff, you can actually go through the private things. So people can afford private health insurance for things like, facelifts or doing some sort of medical procedure, growing, bigger boobs, or have some injury and need to basically get corrective surgery. They're an athlete, as an example. They can get that very quickly through that. They don't have to go on a waiting list. So for elective surgery, which can sometimes be drawn out in that regard, but at least the emergency system is quick, and that's a good thing, and that's what we want. I mean, even if America didn't provide universal for everything, just provided for emergency universal, it would be a dramatic improvement to the system, So, yeah. And it would save more lives. I'm talking to a European crowd that has a very similar system like in Australia. So you guys, you understand the benefits of these sort of things, of these, but obviously when I'm talking to US people, like in the morning live stream, I just don't even bring it up because I know I'm going to get into an argumentative situation, so I just leave it, so. And most of them are not here, so they can't argue with me because I can't be fucking bothered. Yes. Look, when it comes to diet, have more faith in capitalism and socialism. Look, when it comes to, I have no faith in either one of them for a number of different reasons. That's why I sort of believe in direct democracy, and a sort of a mix of the two in different ways is a much healthier way. And if you look at even my ancestors, sort of their direct democracy, there was certain things were done by the private sector more efficiently, and some things were by the public sector, and it was kept, but the populace had direct control over the sort of stuff. So it was a very different system. So I'm for neither one of those, and this dichotomy that I'm a very much eclectic. That's the word, eclectic. Where economies of scale of a government type thing works better, apply that. Where economies of scale of a private like producing a vehicle or producing a laptop or whatever works better, apply that. So, that's a much better way of doing it, rather than doing it, some things have to be done in a certain way where there is, because you can't put a profit on people's health, or you can't put a profit on education. If you run it on an education on profit base, you'll never educate anyone, or you'll poorly educate because you're not getting enough money from the poor people. So you need government to basically provide. If you take a look, the best education systems in the world are run by governments. In Greece, it's actually 2 years ahead because they have no private. It's all public, which means even the rich kids go to the public school. So the rich families obviously want the public schools to be good because their kids are going there as well, not only the poor kids. There's a lot of reasons for why they prioritize, private schools when they exist, because they're getting the benefits. But if you take a look at the societies, Greece, my nephew, when he got here, he was 2 years ahead. He said, I've already done this mathematics and all that in Greece 2 years ago. It was just basically easy for him for doing a lot of the subjects. That's an indictment for countries, and the US is even worse. That's why US can't even train people sufficiently, and most of the people that have, for high technology stuff like that are either coming out of private schools from wealthy families, or they're coming from overseas, brain drain on other countries, third world or developing countries, where they're not educating their own people. They've just thrown them on the scrap heap to work at McDonald's for $5 an hour. So that's what they think about their population there. That's the worst sort of nature of the beast, the capitalist beast, when you unleash it. But when it comes to, places like Finland, for instance, it's universal. Its education is highly respected and has got some of the highest levels of quality education, and it's all done by the public, and it costs less because the public system costs less. It's simple. You've got less, even you need less, even less bureaucracy. And the reason why you need less bureaucracy is, especially if you use a system like they do in Finland, which is sort of, the education is sort of independent, so the local school itself runs itself, but it's still part of the public system, but it runs itself, and so they have to basically run it well in that regard. So it's less bureaucratized. So there is a way of doing things which are much better and much more innovative. So there's a lot of things we can learn from different countries. We don't have to follow one thing, and there'll be variations. But, when you look at public education in the US, it's a joke, basically. And that's why their population is struggling to keep up with the rest of the world. And they wonder why China is outpacing them in R&D, and why a number of other countries, even when on a per capita basis, the US is falling behind, is because their education is really just has deteriorated over since Reaganomics. And the same thing has happened to Britain. Thatcherism, this sort of private bullshit thing in education. There are things that the government does better with economies of scale when you're educating or healing people or stuff like that, and things where private entities do it much better, producing products, goods and services. They're much better and more efficient at doing that. No committees, just what the market wants. That works well. But there are things, as I said, I'm an eclectic person. Certain things are done better by one entity or the other. So, yes, that's why I'm very eclectic on these things. And probably I do both. As I said, I've said it earlier, I piss off both my left-wing friends and my right-wing friends for the same reasons, because one moment I'm agreeing with one group and then the other moment I'm agreeing with the other group, and that really annoys them. But, I don't jump into political camps. I can't be fucked. What works? That's what interests me. It's again, this tribalism which we see doesn't really help. It's like in the food politics. You're part of that food mafia clan. No, I'm basically, if I see something wrong, and this is why people like me and Bart are very different, because we look, what does the science tell us? We don't basically we're not basically saying, we don't take the line that a lot of low carbers. If you look at the low carb community, what does it say? Sugar is bad. And, and then you've got the other side saying, oh, fat is bad. They're both wrong. It's the Randall cycle, idiots. It's the Randall cycle. When you engage the Randall cycle by combining sugar and fat, that's when you get in the most trouble. But speaking of lefties, haven't seen Helmut for a while. Oh, who knows what he's doing? He lost the plot a long time ago. But when it comes to that sort of position, they're both wrong. But both the low fat and low carb, both do not engage the Randall cycle, but one is contraindicated because it's unhealthy, because it's nutrient deficient, and the other one isn't. And that's the difference. And that's how we know what a species appropriate diet is. Then we look at the archaeological evidence. But most people don't do that because they have blind faith or blind belief in one of the isms. See the end of those things? There is an ISM, that's an ism. When you're an ism person, you've got blinkers on. You don't see, when I hear people say an ism, I'm going, okay, you got blinkers. Immediately, I know. I'm not having a go at you, Blinky, don't worry, but it means you've got blinkers. And unfortunately, most people do. And that's why I usually rub people on both sides of politics the wrong way and tend to vote for more independence people. Actually, my independent candidate in the place that I've resided did get in, which was good. But beyond that, that's the reality of the sort of things that most people, it's when we liberate ourselves from the isms and we realize our potential as humans, like we did when we were out there hunting and we were truly free and truly in control of our destiny, when we actually realize that, we will truly have come of age. We will have truly done full circle and met our ancestors and realized that we can basically do a lot of things. They spread themselves with far less information than us all over the world. And look, they conquered the entire planet. Look at the changes that they brought about. And the rest of us are too fearful to even make a decision for ourselves nowadays. What an indictment. What an absolute indictment to the degeneration of our species. Absolute indictment. Yeah, it's just crazy. Anyway, guys, I gotta go. Yes, I've got a few things to do. And yes, yeah, things are crazy. I know, Bert. Yeah, possibly civil war in different parts of the world. Yeah, it's just gone mad. Yes, we live in interesting times in that regard. We definitely live in very interesting times. But yeah, it's a weird and wacky world. Yes, I'm a bit of a centrist as well. And when I talk about a centrist, I basically am very much a person that basically, when I see good ideas and good policies and all that, I'll support them. But I tend to never really find 100% a policy that I agree with. I agree with partially. And it's usually what sways me a bit or not, if the majority of it I sort of agree with it or not. And it's because it still comes from those isms. That's sort of the biggest problem. But you can't have everything in this world. And unfortunately, the isms will outlive me. And that's the reality. And it's, all I can do is try and help people with some ideas on nutrition, on their health, also freeing their mind to think a bit independently, to basically wake up to themselves and not basically just follow, isms, but actually think, what are those people saying and what really does it mean in practical terms? It also means that you'll probably become more disagreeable with most people, but that's the reality. It's probably a reason why I've only got less than 800 subs. It's just the way it is. But I would rather be that way than basically sort of follow a whole lot of experts and all that. I don't follow experts. If somebody's got a good credible argument, they can back it up with good data and all that, I'll agree with it. If somebody's got a good policy that does work, and they can actually show me, they can demonstrate we've applied it here or applied it there and it does work, I'll support it. I don't care who it comes from, whether it comes from a lefty or righty. If they basically have something that actually works, yeah. But, unfortunately, most of them don't. And most of them play the ism cards and all that. And it's all about power by small minorities of elites. And they just manipulate us. from Tweedledum to Tweedledee, unfortunately. So, you know, it's going to take a while before a lot of people wake up. You know, it's not only on the politics side, it's also on nutrition. All these come together. If we are going back to an ancestral diet, it means also taking responsibility for our lives direct with other humans and basically being willing to talk at an equal level with other humans, you know, on a digitized campfire. You know, so using blockchain and other things, using a sort of a digitized direct democracy or direct thing, you can sort of start at a local level and then sort of scale it up in certain ways in that regard, you know. But it basically brings us full circle to that where we are responsible humans, active humans in our lives. We don't allow others to tell us how to live our lives, but we are actively involved, and we are actively involved in determining good nutrition based on ancestral principles. And that all comes back to those ancestral principles. You know, you look at the Maasai, they sit around a campfire, they talk, they go and do things together. They are, you know, the perfect sort of free people within a collective. But without imposing, they still have voices, all of them. So it's this sort of relationship. That's the problem with the isms. The isms either want to impose one thing or impose another thing and all that. They can't create this, you know, really nice mesh of that in between, you know. So I'll let you think about how our ancestors, some of the stuff that Neri's talked about, how these groups live, and some of the things that we can learn from our, you know, our great moments when we created moments where we lifted the human spirit and we didn't basically impose burdens or pressures or force it into the, you know, to basically be dictated or told what to do. Nowadays, basically, when you look at both sides of politics, they seem to basically be pushing an authoritarian line to tell us how to live our lives. And I'm sick of it. And I think the rest of you guys are sick of it as well, especially in this community. It's a question of, you know, whether we can convince more people out there in the long run. Yeah, it's going to be a hard slog, I can tell you. Anyway, guys, I better bloody go. I've extended it another half an hour. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. You know, hope to see you guys next week, and we will chat again. And if you've got stuff, you know, you want to send me to look at or whatever, I really would appreciate it. You know, just email it to me. I'm always interested, even at controversial stuff, you know, like some of this sort of, you know, studies and all that on pork, or the studies on the SARS-2 or whatever. Always looking forward to stuff like that, because we sometimes have to challenge ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, push ourselves and say, oh, you know, and then work out, well, you know, if people are arguing certain things, why are they arguing? Where are they wrong? Or what have they missed? We always, you know, can find, you know, things. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Oh, Blinky, my dear friend. Get rid of the Gatling gun, mate. Get rid of the Gatling gun. We're going hunting, mate, for kangaroos. Thanks, Bert. Thanks, Bjorn. Appreciate it, mate. Thanks, guys. Good night. And I'm out of here. See you guys next week. And also look forward to the other videos that I'm going to make. It'll be really good information. You'll really enjoy them. I'm certain about it. G'day, Lukey. You're late, mate. Not a problem. You're welcome, Robert. What happened, Lukey? Did you piss in your bed or something? You woke up. Yeah, exactly. Oh, late. Yeah, late. He's late. You're right. You're right, Blinky. He's a slacker. See you guys. Take care and look after your families. See yous.